and welcome to the Park Recreation Open Space Commission meeting for Monday, February 1st, 2021. This meeting is being held in accordance with the Brown Act as currently in effect under the State Emergency Services Act, the Governor's Emergency Declaration related to COVID-19, and the Governor's Executive Order N-2920 issued on March 17, 2020, that allows attendance by members of the Commission, city staff, and public to participate and conduct the meeting by video conference. Video conference locations are not open to the public. To provide a live remote public comment, join the Zoom video conference meeting. The meeting ID is 965-5815-7161. And the password is 570310. Should you choose to not provide comments but would like to view the meeting, you may do so in one of the following ways: YouTube Live, Comcast Cable Channel 28, Rossmore Channel 26, Wave Channel 29, AT&T UVerse Channel 99, or live stream online on the city's website. I have one additional announcement before we start the meeting further. We have received comments today from residents regarding item 4B on tonight's PROS agenda, the 2022 through 2031 10-year capital investment program, CIP. The comments are regarding attachment 1 in the packet, which summarizes the estimates for future park in lieu fees and available funds. There were concerns that we should not be including park in lieu funds from the speaker development of the Hale property in the revenue estimates since the project has not been approved. To clarify, we have not included those potential funds in the CIP revenue estimates as shown in attachment 2, which is the document we will be working and discussing tonight. In reviewing the attachments, it could be confusing. While forecasted projects are routinely included in the CIP, the potential revenue was not included in the total revenue estimates for the 10-year CIP due to the uncertainty of the approval of the project. Staff will recommend that the attachment be amended to clarify this. Staff will respond to the emails we have received on this issue and correct the misinformation. We apologize for this confusion. Secretary Ballinger, will you call the roll, please?
Yes, my pleasure. Commissioner Kearsley?
Here.
Commissioner Moran?
Here.
Commissioner Weston?
Here.
Vice Chair Davenport?
Here.
And Chair Oler?
Here. Public communications is our next item on the agenda. As some attendees may be participating in their first Walnut Creek PROS Commission meeting or their first teleconference meeting, I want to welcome everyone and talk briefly about the public comment process. This portion of the meeting is reserved for comment on items not on the agenda. Under the Brown Act, the Commission cannot act on items raised during public communications, but may respond briefly to statements made or questions posed, request clarification, or refer the item to staff. When I open the public comment period, use the raise hand feature or press *9 if you are connected by audio only, which will alert staff that you have a public comment you would like to provide. Please wait your turn, and once brought into the meeting, state your name and city of residence for the record. Each speaker will have 2 minutes to make your remarks. Does any member of the public wish to speak on an item not on the agenda? At this time, I will ask Secretary Ballinger if there are any members of the public who would like to provide comments.
You're on mute.
Was I on mute? I'm sorry. At this time, we do not have anybody that wants to speak.
All right. Next item on the agenda is the consent calendar. And this is for approval of minutes of the regular meeting of the Pros Commission on December 7th, 2020. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Please call the roll.
I'm sorry, I didn't catch who made the motion. Oh, Kearsley. Okay, Commissioner Kearsley,
Yes.
Commissioner Weston,
Yes.
Commissioner Moran,
Yes.
Vice Chair Davenport,
Yes.
and Chair Oler.
Yes.
The item passes unanimously. And I think I have to go back to public communication. There might be one hand raised, and I'm sorry we missed it. I'm
No problem.
clarifying that.
Sure. So we're going back to public comment, communication.
We have Michelle Sheehan with her hand raised, but she might be wanting to speak on item 4B. So we should clarify.
I understand the situation in 4B, and I'm going to redirect the way that I present this. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. So yes, I understand there are proposed funds on 4B. So I'm just going to make this more of a general statement, and that is asking the commission to make their voice heard in opposition to that project, which we know has not been yet approved. But the funds, if they did come, would come from a development of 30 acres of undeveloped county property, which is directly adjacent to Heather Farm Park, and which would have a significant negative impact on the park. Speaker Development wants the county to amend the county's general plan, which currently allows for up to 150 homes on the property. They want the county to instead allow for complete eradication and plow down of the natural landscape through the construction of a large-scale walled-off gated compound of multi-story buildings encompassing 451 living units, along with both the clubhouse, recreation, and other outbuildings for the project's residents. The current park view to the ridgeline would be obscured by the park's two-story institutional healthcare center, a commercial-type enterprise partially open to the public, which would loom right over the park's much loved nature area and horse arena. An emergency entrance and exit would bring the traffic through Heather Farm Park from one end to the other. We realize it's a stretch to think we might completely save this piece of Walnut Creek's natural heritage and beauty with its spectacular view of Mount Diablo. But we ask that you stand up for at least a better choice for park neighbor. We ask that you let the county and the city council know that you do not want the county to approve a general plan amendment which would allow this overbuild right next to your and our park. Another option, which adheres to the current general plan and brings the funds to the city, will come along. You can count on it. Please visit our website at save7hillsranch.org to learn more. I made it. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments.
5 seconds to spare.
We have one more speaker. It's Reese Design and Build.
Please go ahead.
He's now lowered his hand, so maybe he would like to speak in one of the other items.
Sure. Okay, this completes our public comment period. We're going to move to item 4A, considerations, Walnut Creek Trail Committee recommendations update. Next on the agenda is an item for Commission consideration. At this time, I invite staff to provide the staff presentation.
Hi, good evening, commissioners. My name is Mike Vickers, and joining me in this presentation this evening is interim supervising ranger Corey Frazier. And Corey's going to go ahead and get us. We got a two-part presentation here. One is on enforcement, and the second part is on an update to a flow trail that's being designed in Southern Lime Ridge. So I'm going to turn it over to Corey. He's going to share his presentation on enforcement. I'm going to roll right into the Southern Lime Ridge update, and then we'll take questions from there. Go ahead, Corey. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Do we have the slides ready to go? Are they visible? Perfect. Thank you. And thank you everybody for attending tonight. First, I'd like to apologize that this was not presented at the last pros meeting. This information on enforcement should be taken into context as it relates to the recommendations set forth by the Trail Committee that were presented at the most recent pros meeting held back in December. There were some logistics regarding enforcement that needed to be worked out on our end. However, now we feel confident that our plan regarding enforcement in the open space can and will be successful in helping us reach the goals that the trail system is safe and sustainable, and that plants and wildlife are being appropriately protected. Next slide, please. Educational approach to enforcement. Enforcement situations can and still will be viewed as educational opportunities. The committee believes that users should be made aware of why certain policies are in place and what the effects are if those policies are not followed. For over a decade, enforcement in the open space has been handled by the issuing of verbal warnings, and in more serious cases, Walnut Creek PD has been called out to assist. The committee recommends that in addition to educational awareness and verbal warnings, rangers should issue citations in situations where enforcement is deemed necessary. If you were to receive a citation in the open space, you would not be required to appear in court. However, there would be a fine associated with the citation. Disputes will be handled in the same manner as a parking citation dispute would, and will be arbitrated by an outside company. As you can see on the screen, there are a list of the violation amounts. For first violation, it's not to exceed $100. For the second, it's not to exceed $200. And for the third, it's not to exceed $500. And these are all within 1 calendar year. Next slide, please. One focus of enforcement will be ensuring the safety of the trail system. We receive a lot of concerns regarding bicycle use in the open space. Many of those concerns are related to speed and improper yielding. If you are riding in a manner that is negligent or unsafe and may put others in danger, you will be subject to a citation. Other violations related to bicycle use: riding in areas where use is prohibited, including in areas clearly marked as closed and on non-designated trails. The creation of new trails and the act of deliberately moving soil and or the removal of plant material without the city's approval is strictly prohibited and also subject to citation. Next slide, please. With that said, there are a number of other citable violations in the open space not related to bicycle use, including but not limited to failure to obey restrictions on any properly posted sign, illegal camping and fires, smoking, the use of motorized vehicles in the open space, harming or capturing of plants and wildlife, after hours use, and others. We recognize signage as the best way to make users aware of such policies and intend to keep them up to date and informative. But ultimately, it is up to the user to know what is and what is not permitted in the open space. Next slide, please. Lastly, we are a small staff with many responsibilities. We will be seeking the help of volunteers to assist with enforcement and to help educate users of certain policies. We intend to bring back the volunteer patrol program and we'll be looking for qualified individuals to fill those roles. More information on the program will be available soon. Thank you. I'll turn the rest over to Mike to give you an update on the proposed flow trail.
Good evening once again, commissioners, and thank you, Corey. And thank you for helping out Cindy. We appreciate it. My update is regarding the design or in the process of design flow trail for Southern Lime Ridge. And for those of you who are not familiar with that area, it is directly above Arbolado Park and above the Rancho Paraiso neighborhood. Before I get started in sharing the details of this plan, I do want to remind the commission and the viewers that this is a recommendation from the Open Space Trails Committee that was brought forward during the December 7th meeting and can be found in the report on page 17. So what is a flow trail? A flow trail can be defined as a few different things. Most importantly, it is a sustainable trail. It's a multi-use trail, and it is built to enhance the bicycle experience. Why are we building this? Well, the number one reason is there is a lot of impact, a lot of users in Central Lime Ridge, where there is a large population of rare plant material, and we are trying to provide an opportunity to move some of the users to another location in order to prevent any more damage or future damage to that rare plant material. This project, and we talked a little bit about this back on the December 7th meeting. This was a 18-month project. There was about 10 to 12 of us that were on the committee, and I've had some questions from community members about, hey, why wasn't there an opportunity from someone in the neighborhood to be able to sit on the committee? When we put this project together, we certainly had no idea we were going to end up where we ended up. It was something that the thoughts and the team came together and looked for an opportunity. In fact, this project came up about 3/4 of the way through the process. So we weren't trying to exclude anybody from the process. This was just one of the positives that came out of that group event. So as I mentioned earlier, this is directly above Arbolado Park, Rancho Paraiso neighborhood. The bluish or black line that you're looking at is the proposed design. It's probably, I think it's about 1 mile to 1.2 miles in distance. You'll see that there are a lot of switchbacks, which is one of the benefits of a flow trail. It helps control speed. With every one of these sharp turns, you're slowing down. There are obstacles sometimes in order to prevent speed, and oftentimes you'll be going downhill and then it will push you back uphill in order to slow your speed down. Next slide, please. This is the lower portion of the trail. The upper portion would be considered probably more for avid users, and the lower portion would be considered for an easier ride, or maybe newcomers or beginners of the biking sport. The one area on this trail I want to point out where you see Timberleaf Trail there, it's kind of middle right. Keep that in mind. We're going to be talking a little bit more about that on the next couple slides. Okay, if you can move forward, please, Cindy. So, not that this is exactly related to this project, but there is some new news that I wanted to share with the commission and also with some of the viewers. For those of you who are familiar with the area, there is a long stretch of power lines that run through, basically starting above Arbolado Park, up over the hills and into Concord. You can see that semi-straight line that was drawn there on this plan in red. For some of you that live in the area, I think it was a couple winters ago, a number of the power lines blew down in a windstorm. They've since been put up. PG&E has committed to undergrounding these lines. and the project is being managed through PG&E and our engineering team. This is a stretch, as I mentioned, that goes from Arbolado through the potential trail area, well, through the trail area and over into Concord. The project is supposed to take place or start sometime middle to end of spring, which is a huge benefit. From stories that I've heard in the past, there was a fire that was started from some arcing wires in this location. So it's a huge benefit to get these wires underground, and just fantastic that PG&E is focused on this area and ensuring the safety of the neighborhood and the community as a whole. There's also some mitigation money that PG&E will be giving the city that will go into some future planting around the trail in that area. Next slide, please. So neighbor concerns, and this really takes me back to the Rancho Paraiso community. There's been a number of individuals, along with one of the board members from the HOA, that's reached out to me with a number of concerns, and for the most part, it's around parking and security. A little bit about vegetation, but vegetation management, and I'll share that with you in a minute. Parking is a concern for the people in that area. They're worried about this trail potentially driving, a lot of newcomers or a lot of people wanting to use the new trail. We have designated 3 spots throughout the Lime Ridge open space as trailheads that will provide access to this flow trail. All 3 have parking lots. The first one is Arbolado Park. Not only does it provide enough parking, there's also a restroom there and an easy access trail that gets you from Arbolado Park into the open space trails. The second, which is not far from Arbolado Park, is at the end of Valley Vista. It is the parking lot adjacent to the Boundary Oak Golf Course. There's plenty of parking there. There's also restroom facilities there in the clubhouse. And the third, if you wanted to make this a 5 or 6 mile, or maybe 6 miles too many, maybe a 4 or 5 mile loop trail, you could actually park over at the Montecito parking lot, which is in Concord, right at the intersection of Montecito and YVR. There's parking over there. You can jump on the trail and eventually get yourself up through the flow trail and work yourself right back to your vehicle if that's where you were staged. Parking in Arbolado, parking in the Rancho Paraiso community on Timberleaf, some of these side streets, is going to be discouraged. And there are a number of measures that we will take if needed. And I'm not going to get too much into detail. However, I'll share some of them with you. Parking signage. There, for example, we can install, working through our traffic engineer, we can install some temporary open space parking signage, meaning the trail's restricted. The Timberleaf Trail, as I pointed out earlier, is about a 4-foot trail, which is considered single track trail. However, we have 4 or 5 trails throughout the open space that are single track trails. However, they are identified as multi-use. This trail we could change in use and turn it in from a multi-use into a hiker equestrian trail, only preventing bicycles from accessing the open space through that court. There's also other measures. Depending on where we go with this, we can build obstacles. And if you can envision it, it's as you're entering towards a trail, if you have to walk through kind of a zigzag pattern in order to get into that trail, it would certainly be accessible for a hiker, but would be more challenging, if not very difficult, for a cyclist to get a bike through that area. And then lastly, we could potentially close or lock those trails for a period of time. And those are we could work it out with the neighborhood, whether we put a combination lock or something along those lines, and members of the HOA had the lock, they could get in and out. Those are pretty extreme measures. We're not at all envisioning we're going to need to get there. But we have thought about it, and we'll do our best to work with the community to ensure that their parking isn't restricted. When you get into courts like Timberleaf, for example, there is very little street parking, and I can certainly understand the concerns of having other vehicles take up the limited amount of on-street parking. And we're well aware, we've certainly heard the community, and we'll do our best to work with them. So security is in line with parking. There's, anytime you have people that are new to the area, there's certainly some security issues. The Timberleaf Trail, for example, goes back up over people's backyards, and you can look into people's yards, and there's been some concerns. I think the parking restrictions and maybe the change in use of the trail will help mitigate that. And then lastly is fire prevention and weed abatement. And Cindy, if you could move to the next slide, please. So for those of you who live in the area, you'll understand that the red line there right above the housing complex is really our disking line. There is some hand abatement that takes place in there depending on the elevation change. And the reason I'm bringing this up is because I've heard from neighbors, if there is more use in that area, there's more potential for fire. And so this is why I'm addressing this in this manner. We are looking at widening the disc line. The disc line, we already, actually weed abatement in general, we do about 25 to 30% more than we're required by the county. This would even be in addition to that in terms of hand abatement and disking. We can bring out goats. We've started using goats in a variety of different areas around the open space where we can target higher vegetation areas to reduce the potential for fire. And then lastly, we have some vegetation management needs along the back of some people's properties that I've been talking to and that we've been trying to address over the last few years, and we'll certainly address those issues as we move into the spring and summer season. Next slide, please. So that concludes my presentation, and now we'll open it back up to the commission for questions on both the enforcement and the flow trail. Thank you.
Thanks, Mike and Corey. Do we have any questions for either of the two segments? Go ahead, Commissioner Moran.
Thanks, guys. Corey, I got just some more just general questions about the enforcement. Is how many, like, what's the volunteer patrol look like? Is it a dozen? Is it 5? Like, how many people are you looking for? Are they going to do shifts? I mean, could you maybe, and if they haven't worked out, okay, too, I'm just kind of curious about just how the infrastructure, I guess, kind of looks.
Yeah, definitely.
Makes sense?
Yeah, sure. We don't have all the details worked out. So as far as number of volunteers, I don't have a number for you yet. I don't anticipate it being as many as 12. I think it'd be a smaller group. And it'd be focused on the busier times when there's a lot of high use. So weekends where when the rangers are sort of spread thin. And there's going to be some training that's going to be required of these volunteers. I imagine that they would work in shifts. But it all kind of depends on the amount of volunteers we have and the qualifications of those volunteers.
Yeah, because that was kind of my next question. This logistically, I think it was compared to some like a parking citation. So is that just and I'm just more curious than anything else, but is it can I see your driver's license? And here's I'm going to write out your ticket. Is that kind of it?
So for the rangers, yes. We will not be asking volunteers to issue citations. They're going to be helping us with the educational portion of enforcement. So just making folks aware of the certain policies, if they happen to see somebody riding recklessly, they can inform them that, that's not allowed, or if they're in an area where they're not supposed to be, then they can inform them of that as well, but they won't be issuing any citations.
That's kind of where I was going. So thank you. All right.
Yeah.
I'll step down if anybody else has any questions. Thanks.
Can I add just a couple things, if you don't mind, Chair Oler? It's really important that everybody understands that education is certainly, the highest priority. In fact, we have projects going on right now where we're rebuilding our kiosks so that we can get the appropriate amount of information into them, make sure the kiosks are large enough and that we're drawing attention so that we can be upfront and be certain that we're sharing all the information necessary in order to enjoy the open space properly. More importantly, the volunteer patrol program is just an extension of that education. Getting users that are familiar with the sport, getting users that are familiar with the bicycle community out there, talking to their partners or their friends or the individuals that they come across, and we ensure that they are understanding why the rules are set the way the rules are. It's about finding a balance between recreation and the environment. And oftentimes it's much more effective from what I've learned from talking with individuals that run the bike patrol programs in Mid-Penn or East Bay Regional Parks. If the message is sent in a more positive fashion, sometimes coming from one of your constituents. So it's just another way to educate the users. We do not want to get into the citation writing. Citations, as Corey pointed out, go much further than just bicycles. There are individuals that are out there digging for certain things, whether they're trying to dig up something or another, or setting fires and doing other things. This is not just a drive towards bicycles. This is ensuring that the balance between the two are met. So thank you.
All right, Commissioner Kearsley, I believe you had some question.
Yes, thank you. My first question is directed to Corey. Corey, thank you for your presentation. In addition to enforcement, or kind of a subset of that, I noticed one thing we had discussed, or that was brought up last time, was powers of arrest. Is that something that's still on the table? Is that something that's under consideration still? How does that fold into the enforcement effort?
So all the citations we're looking at are just infractions. I don't anticipate rangers being elevated to the level of a police officer. And in order to make an arrest, that's what we would have to be elevated to. We're not peace officers. And I don't believe that's going to change.
Okay, all right, thank you. Second question for Mike. Thank you for your presentation as well. At Timberleaf Court, is it where the trail is there? Does it just dead end into where the court is? The trail just leads into a dead end? Is there any kind of parking as it is? Is it how does it look there? I don't know if you've been in that area. I haven't.
Yeah, I mean it's a court. If you were to drive up Arbolado Drive, it kind of goes in a big loop, and they have these spurs or courts there's 2 or 3 of them that are kind of off, headed out towards the east, up to the back of Central Lime Ridge there. And that's just exactly what they are. They're a court. And at the end of the court, there is a pedestrian access that leads you into the open space.
Is there any is it cul-de-sac, or is it just straight street that, okay.
Cul-de-sac, yes.
Cul-de-sac.
Sorry, yes.
Okay, so there is some minimal street parking currently.
There is very minimal street parking. So I've been in the location as Commissioner Davenport and Chair Orler have been there as well as part of the committee when we were going out there to evaluate these areas. And the parking is very, very minimal, and especially along Timberleaf.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, so I wanted to follow up to the question you had previously for Corey in terms of arresting powers. The Rangers will not be out there arresting one another. We do have constant communication with PD, and if something arose to that situation, we would have police officers support the Rangers or get involved at that point.
So is what is it, 11-1.520, is that off the table currently? It was
In
one
terms
of,
of arresting powers, I apologize. I don't have the ordinance in front of me, so I don't know specifically which one you're referring to, but they will not, yeah, they won't be arresting people. If we need support, we'll be getting PD involved.
okay, that makes sense. Thank you.
Okay, any further questions at this point from our presenters? All right, with that, I'm going to ask for any public commentary that may exist on this issue, on these issues that have been presented. And I wanted to ask for the raise hand feature if you are on Zoom. Press *9 if you are connected by audio only, if you'd like to provide public comment. So Secretary Bollinger, if there are there any members of the public that have asked for comments?
Yes, there is. Our first speaker is Jorge Burnett.
Hi, thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Hi, my name is Jorge Burnett. I'm a resident of Walnut Creek. I live in the Walnut Heights area, and I'm an avid mountain biker. And so I really applaud you guys for building a flow trail. This is my first time being involved in a meeting and being aware of it. And I've lived in the community for 20 years, and I have to say that as a mountain biker, I often get frustrated not having a lack of access of single track trails. And I know there's conflicts between bikers and hikers. And I'm always very courteous and careful with bike riding. I just want to, it's so important to have this as an outlet for our community for biking. I'm an infectious disease doctor at John Muir. I take care of COVID patients all day long. I protect the community. The people I ride with are doctors and surgeons and nurses. They're not a bunch of yahoos that are reckless people. So, we're here as part of the people that help take care of you and your hour of need. And I'm glad that Walnut Creek Open Space is looking at flow trails, and I would encourage the Walnut Creek Commission and people to work well with our community to make these opportunities more available, because it is such an important resource, not only for hikers, but for bikers to have some outlets of a single track. So thank you very much.
Thank you for your comments.
Our next speaker is Susan Miller.
You're still on mute, Susan. We heard just a little bit, but then you went back to mute.
All right. Does that work?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. Susan Miller. I live at 400 Silver Hollow Drive in Rancho Paraiso. And this is the first I've heard of this flow trail. I'm actually quite surprised that we haven't received any information on it, since it does affect our neighborhood in a great way. I'm not real enthused about improving it for the bicyclists. I'll tell you why, is because we already have a tremendous amount of bicyclists that come up Mount Diablo, they come up Barbalato, Mount Diablo, and they also use the Walnut Creek Canal Trail. And, the person before mentioned he's not a Yahoo, but it's been my experience that the bicyclists, don't always yield to pedestrians, and it's not necessarily, the safest combination. And I'm having a hard time envisioning what this flow trail is going to look like. What exactly, how are you improving it? What are you putting down to improve it for the bicyclists? What are you doing? There already are dirt bike people that go up there already, as well as pedestrians and hikers. I actually hike the trails myself up there. Do you have funding for this? Do you have a timeline? Are you going to do an environmental document? Are you going to be doing both CEQA and NEPA documents? I just have a lot of questions on it. We have very little information that we've been provided. And I also have a lot of security concerns. You're talking about using Arboleda Park for parking. I can tell you once we get past COVID that parking fills up, especially when we start running soccer on the weekends. And that's when most of the bicyclists are coming out and using the trails, and the areas is on the weekends. So that parking does fill up. So we've got a lot of concerns, and I think you need to really share a lot more with the neighborhood before you proceed any farther. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments.
Our next speaker is Ann Gartner.
Hi, I'm Annie Gardner, and I'm a resident in Rancho Paraiso, and I live on Timberleaf Court. And I actually live right at the trailhead of Timberleaf Court. And what you're proposing is to bring people into my neighborhood and take away my front of my house by bringing people in parking and trash. And when they get done off their mountain bikes, you know, and I'm a mountain biker, and I agree there's great mountain bikers out there, courteous, but there's a lot that aren't. And you're going to bring you know, if you're not advocating in the beginning that they're not coming into our neighborhood, and this whole discouraging, and, you know, I think that we'll be able to provide safety. And Corey saying we have a small staff, so we're going to need help to monitor these things. It's just not acceptable to the community. So you're bringing people into my front yard, and I am a single mom on the end of a court with 3 kids. And you're bringing people into my backyard because you're putting that right behind my house. I've been attacked on the trail before. And so I have a very personal investment in not bringing people into my community, around me and around my kids. So you haven't given us the ability, I'm sorry, baby, just a minute. So you haven't given us the ability to say that this is not okay. There's plenty of places in the open space where you could move it away from communities, and you're bringing it right behind our houses. So thinking about moving it to the backside of the hill, think about moving it to away to the fire roads and not into the single track of a single community in a single end of a court should be really considered to get us a safe way to bring, you know, and you've got bikers up there that I understand are destroying the environmental impact, but you need to not bring more people into a small group and impact us all in our lives.
Thank you for your comments tonight.
Our next speaker is Aaron.
Good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you. My name is Aaron McIntyre. I'm from Oakland. I lived in Contra Costa for 4 years before living in this side of the county, or this side of the bay, East Bay. I do frequent Lime Ridge quite often for the mountain bike availability. I'm grateful that everyone here is taking the time to have the conversation about giving the mountain bike community more access. My concern, or my question for Mike is, what is the schedule currently, and how can the mountain biking community continue to encourage the schedule to support our access? Thank you.
Thank you for your comments.
Our next speaker is Leslie Hunt.
Leslie, you're currently muted.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can. Bill?
Both Leslie and I would like to speak, I think. I'll go first. I'm Bill Hunt, a resident of Walnut Creek, and a member of the Trails Committee that produced the report discussed tonight. We had representatives from all of the user communities on that committee, and we came together to produce the report. Enforcement was a key element to that report. We felt it was something that needed to be part of the mix of our actions going forward. So our committee was in favor of having enforcement as an element of our management of the open space, and we hope that you will accept that recommendation tonight. About the flow trail, there actually is one member of the committee who lives in Rancho Paraiso. So it wasn't as though there was no one there who understood the concerns of the neighborhood. And the rest of us listened and tried to be supportive of issues about access and parking. So I think that staff needs to listen to neighbors more, inform them more. But I point out that there were multiple methods of access to the proposed flow trail, and that Timberleaf Court is only one. And if it needs to be handled in a way that minimizes use to the flow trail, then that should be acceptable. There's still other ways to use the trail. So again, I hope that the commission will accept this recommendation and we can move forward to make things better in our open space.
Thank
And
you.
doesn't have anything to say at the moment.
Okay, thank you. Thank you both for being here.
Our next speaker is Richard Scoe.
Richard, you still show on mute. Now you're going.
Am I on now?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Yes. I live at 3960 Arbolado Drive, which is the main street just above Timberleaf. And we have a access road which runs between our home and the home below us going down toward Timberlake. It's a fire trail and there is a gate at the end of that trail. And from living in the neighborhood for over 20 years now, I can tell you that it's greatly used. Those gates do not seem to be a stop for people. They just climb the gates. They're locked, but they just climb them. There's a lot of intrusion that goes on in our neighborhood just as a result of that, much less making an open trail there off of Timberleaf. And I guess some of the greater concern of the neighbors around here is that it looks right down into our neighborhoods. It takes all the privacy that we've ever had. And it sort of does away with the whole concept of the open space that we were buying into when we bought our homes here. This was an open space that was protected. It was nothing was going to be going on behind us, but now they're bringing in all kinds of people that are foreign to our area. Some of them may be very good people. I know I do bike riding myself. I'm a road bike rider. I'm not a mountain bike rider. But I think the commission has got to consider the impact this is going to have on our neighborhood here. And there's a lot of other areas that can really be looked at. I believe it was mentioned that the area off of the Boundary Oaks Golf Course, that certainly is an open area there. There are entrances up into that area. And I was also informed, I believe, that the area that was coming off of what was called the Montecito parking area, I thought that that area was going to be closed, and there was going to be some rehabilitation of the ground area around there and the native plants. And you know, just moving it over to another area, it's going to be just damaged greatly, and it's going to be very visible to the whole hillside here. And if you want to look at the hillside, it's a beautiful area, and that's why we're here. And it really decreases the value of our property. And I really think that the commission should consider this before we go jumping off into another fiasco like presently exists in some of the areas where the mountain biking is going on. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments.
Our next speaker is Peter Jordan.
Peter, you're still on mute.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, yes,
Hello?
we can hear
You
you.
can't hear me. Okay, great. Thank you. Great, thank you. Thanks for the opportunity. And I am a hiker up in our hills and do it quite often. And I do run into more than my share of bikers. And you know, the trails as designed over in the Middle Lime Ridge area, I think work well. I think bringing, I'm sorry, I'm also a member of the HOA board at Rancho Paraiso. I want to make sure you know that. But bringing bike riders over to our area that is known as a hiking and horseback riding area. We have DeVito Ranch right in our neighborhood. Horses are up and down the hill all the time, and causing more bikes to come into the neighborhood is just a mistake. Plus, nobody seems to address the fact that there are more and more electric or battery operated bikes going up the hill. I was hiking this last Sunday and 4 bikers came by with batteries and just zoomed right up the hill and then took their paths where they were. It's, you know, it's an impact, and there's going to be accidents, and this trail could potentially cause them. I'm shocked and would demand that an EIR and a traffic study be done for this. And then finally, to the one gentleman who mentioned that there's a member of the Rancho Paraiso community that was part of this committee. I'm on the board. I never heard one word from anybody from that committee, this gentleman, and to say that we were aware of it is absolutely not true. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments.
Our next speaker is Ryan Mitchell.
All right, can you hear me?
Yes.
All
Yes,
right,
we can.
awesome, thank you. So I just want to thank you guys at first for allowing bikes up at Lime Ridge because I am a mountain biker. Oh, also my name's Ryan Mitchell. I'm from Oakley, California, so I do take time to get out there. But it's very hard for the biking community to find places to ride, and I think getting this flow trail would be very beneficial because it allows us to go to a safe place where we can ride and know that it's built for bikes instead of bikers that do go out there and make those trails off that are not supposed to be there, the unsanctioned one, sorry. Because that will happen. I hate to say it, but that's just how people are. And I think that if you make an actual trail, that'll happen less, and it'll also diversify the bikes on the trails, making less bikers in certain spots to thin it out a little bit. So there's less interactions with hikers and bikers. And I think that's all I have to say. And thank you guys for your work and all you guys do.
Thank you for your comments.
Our next speaker is Valerie.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay,
Yes, we
thank you.
can.
Thank you. I live in Rancho Paraiso, and I'd like to express my concern that this process has gone this far down the line without any community involvement or input. That is exceptionally disconcerting to me. I've lived in Walnut Creek for 25 years. I'm also concerned when I hear Corey and Mike talk about all the issues that exist with mountain biking trails that already exist in Lime Ridge. Corey has to get greater enforcement to keep people from ruining the environment, and we have to have citations because people are not obeying the rules. You know, Mike is talking about, you know, how, you know, we have to protect the environment and the habitat. So the answer from this commission is to move the problem to a different part of Lime Ridge. Truthfully, I find that offensive. That isn't an answer. There is a severe problem in Lime Ridge, and moving it to behind Rancho Paraiso is not an answer. I've been up on those hills. I have looked at where you're proposing this trail. And as you've already mentioned, you cannot control where these bikers go, which means they're going to go off that trail and down these hills and into our community and behind other people's homes. You also mentioned people on motorized bikes and people starting fires and issues happening. And that is, again, going to come right behind a very substantial community of people that you're going to put at risk. Never mind, the Timberleaf access trail as it is in a bit of a gully, and that gully is full of highly flammable material that is not maintained by this city, that will bring fires straight down onto Timberleaf and into our community. So I want to understand what this commission's position is. Should a fire break out, will they be liable for that if a fire breaks out from these people on motorized bikes and fires and all the issues that come with this? So it's really problematic to me that you're saying there's a huge issue in Lime Ridge with all the things going on with mountain bikers not obeying the rules. And your answer is to bring it over here. We strongly in this community object to this entire process. We object to the idea that you want to bring this into our community. And we'd like you all to reevaluate exactly why we would add another mountain biking trail to Lime Ridge when there's mountain biking trails all over the Bay Area, including Castle Rock. We do not need to bring another one into this area and into the backyard of my neighborhood. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments.
Our next speaker is Bo Abismayas.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yeah, I live right beside Timberleaf Court and the Arbolado. I'm a longtime resident, moved here in 1999. Went through 3 fires over that same hill that you're looking at. Okay. I know the hill because I'm a scout leader, and that's where my kids do trail. That's how we do hiking. It's open space. It's beautiful for hiking, for the horses. A lot of the elder folks in our community go there. So you have to really look at how that would work. Second, you never gone through burglary. While I'm gone on business, somebody broke into our house and they parked there in Timberleaf Court to hide where they are. And you could go into Walnut Creek Police of what damage they've done to my house. And you're gonna do that to our community. That's the point. And I have my wife freaking out, reliving this whole thing. You folks never solicited the homeowners. Why? That's not how the community works. Walnut Creek is better than that, right? You know, come on. That's not how we do it. Third, we already installed cameras at the entry point of Arbolado Drive because of a lot of solicitations, a little bit of petty crimes and all those. Arbolado Drive towards Timberleaf Court is a hill. It's good for skateboarding, human luging, and bikes are already coming down. I back out through the street and I have to look twice because there are bikers already careening down the hill. So I'm just a little concerned of the thought process of this committee. I'm open to open space. I'm a mountain biker, but I know when you should really draw the line. Come on. If you're protecting plants there, whatever, salmon, whatever, fine. Don't redirect the problem. Just leave it be so that vegetation could live, right? So that my kids, my future grandkids could enjoy it when I'm a scoutmaster for them. Come on, that's totally wrong. You know, you never brought this to our homeowners association. We always have meetings and you could have indulged us, engaged us. That's it. But thank you for all your work. I really appreciate it. You know, we value what you bring to you know, our open space and for why Walnut Creek is Walnut Creek. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments.
Next speaker is Josh Raymonde.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Hey, just wanted to reach out and say thank you for considering this. Speaking on behalf of the mountain bike community, we know that there's a lot of great trails around the Bay Area, but this just happens to be a really good resource that is in our backyard. And I am also a resident and very thankful to have this type of consideration as it shows responsibility, social responsibility to a community that is families. I ride with my two sons, and this is something that is safe and active fun for us and to enjoy. We know this is happening in areas of Santa Cruz and Marin, and they make this work. And so I'm sure there's been some consulting that has been done with those other communities and how they make it work, because it does work in these other communities. And we're excited to have an organized effort on this, because it is definitely well needed. There is a large community of riders here that are very much involved in the community and are just excited to have this opportunity and look forward to more of these type of resources being available to our family and friends. Last, I just want to address, it looks to me like the parking lot by Boundary Oaks seems like the primary resource for entering and exiting the trail. And so I don't know how much that Timberlake Trail is going to be impacted, but it looks like there's been some serious consideration of those residents, and well done. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments.
Our next speaker is Liz Nomura.
Liz, you are still on mute. For a second there, we saw you go off mute, but heard nothing.
Oh, it's me. Oh, yes. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, actually, Liz is my wife. I'm on her computer. So this is Brent. And thanks for taking my call. I wanted to just actually give a little historical background to this issue regarding Timberleaf Court. I'm a resident of Timberleaf Court. I'm one of the original owners. On July 16th, 1996, City Council, Dan Cather, who was at that time head of the Parks and Rec Department, we had a similar hearing. And I actually have a tape of that hearing, but I was at that hearing where the residents and the neighbors and the community and all the stakeholders had input on this issue with regarding actually the Timberleaf Trailhead site. And all these issues were raised, the fire dangers. I raised the fire dangers because I've actually lived through 2 fires, had my house burned down in both of those fires. And at that time, I was concerned about the fact that Timberleaf is a long dead end street, which would be very difficult for a fire truck to try to back out of. And if there were any cars parked in that back cul-de-sac, there's really only one space there because the other space has a fire hydrant in front of it. That's right in front of my house. It would be almost impossible for that fire truck to maneuver. We had, subsequent to that hearing, by the way, at that hearing, the city council and all the members voted pretty much overwhelmingly that Timberleaf would not be recognized as a trailhead site that would be advertised by the city. It would not be on any of the brochures or any of the documentation evidencing trailhead site for that very reason, to discourage it, because there was absolutely no parking there. It's a narrow street, and if there was a fire or there was any sort of emergency, it would be very difficult to get people out of there and to get the fire department in there and let them to get out. And subsequently, since that meeting, we've had 3 fires on that hillside back there. So there's a definite, this is before all of the PG&E stuff and all the issues that we're having with fires these past few years. We had fires, and this is going back, as I said, 15 years. So there's a real concern here. These issues were all raised. I don't feel that this was adequately, members of the community were adequately brought into this process, because I recently just heard of it. And I share that same viewpoint has been shared by a number of mine. Now, I understand, Mike, you've got a difficult situation. You're trying to come up with a plan here and meet the needs of all these different parties. I get that. And I don't think that, I'm not saying that we should have more trails or bike trails or uses, but I'm saying they have to be thought out, and the stakeholders have to be involved in that process so people can give their input. Because there are some real concerns that I see, as have already been expressed, on how this has been laid out going across the back hill. When we bought into this development, it was made very clear to us that we were going to be an open space. And it was very clear to us that the Timberleaf site was just going to really be a hiking site that would access the trailhead, but it was not going to be really like a full-blown thing that would encourage people to be going there, because there is absolutely no parking there. You're absolutely right. And I don't think we should minimize that. There is no parking. So that is a legitimate concern. And I also think that there's people here in this community that don't feel like they had a part to be in this process. If you have bikes driving across the back of that hill, have you guys done an environmental report? I think that's a very, very good question that was raised by one of the prior parties. Have you done an EIR on that? Because that could have some serious, we have had, I don't know if you know this, but historically we have erosion problems on all of these hills. That was in our disclosures when we bought our houses here originally. Did you guys check that out? We've had actually erosion on our hill behind our house as well. So I think there's some real issues here that haven't been properly addressed that need to be addressed. And I think that the owners in our community are prepared to act if they're not addressed. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments.
Our next speaker is Austin Smith.
Hey. Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Hey, thank you. Thanks for holding this, and thanks for considering additional trails. I want to speak on behalf of the mountain bike community. I have been a resident of the Walnut Creek area for the past 5 years. I live across the valley near Palos Verdes Mall, and I use the open space every week, both hiking and mountain biking. And I just wanted to, voice my support of these additional trails, because, one thing that we've seen here with COVID is just additional use of open space. I was using the trails frequently before COVID, and it's like 500% more people are there, and they're probably going to keep those new hobbies and new habits. So I think it's the sustainable solution is to provide more trails and more access, so people are more dispersed within the space, the open space, so that there's less issues like some folks have described when it comes to interactions between bikers and others. And I just want to also debunk the idea that mountain bikers are yahoos who are, don't care about things. But, I really liked Mike's point when, describing that the trails in central Lime Ridge are closed because there's rare vegetation there. And I feel like that's something that we don't get, we don't get explanations like that for other trails. We just get, no, you're not supposed to do it, and that's the rules. It would be great if the education piece was around why we shouldn't be on specific trails, and I think that would carry a lot more weight. And then also, I just want to say that, me and all my friends, we're business professionals, doctors, lawyers, and we ride mountain bikes together, and that's what we do, with our spare time, and that's our outlet. So we really appreciate having access to trails, and we live in this area specifically to gain access to these trails in the Walnut Creek open space. So thank you.
Thank you for your comment.
Our last speaker on this item is Trish R.
Trish, you're showing as mute right now.
Okay. Hi, my name is Trish Sparrow, and I actually live on 623 Timberleaf Court. And the path to the proposing trail is directly behind my house. So I am actually 100% against it for numerous of reasons. And I'm not sure if any of you have directly gone behind the house. I've heard that you have not, and I'd advise you to go behind there. Number one, the pathway is extremely narrow. So when people walk the pathway, you pretty much cannot even walk side by side on the pathway. So for bikes to even ride it, it's extremely narrow. That's number one. And the weed abatement is completely out of control. Completely out of control. It is so overgrown. The fire hazard, one spark of something that were to go wrong with a bike or anything like that, a fire is just going to spark at any time. There are beer cans behind there, safety issues. So with people, bikes, dogs, the cows, and I believe somebody mentioned that they were to get goats. And I've lived here 22 years, and every year I contact Art to do the weed abatement. I've mentioned cows, if they would be able to provide cows. And his comment to me was, well, then I would have to control somebody to maintain the cows. So his answer was no with the cows. So, and then we have a natural stream behind our house. And in the winter months, that goes where the stream with the trails, that's going to get contaminated with the water. I don't know if anybody's seen the stream that goes behind the house. So so that's just a couple of issues. The parking is just, that's going to be horrendous. There's going to be so much traffic. And I think somebody mentioned about locking that gate. No, people are just going to go over the gate. They're going to throw their bikes over. So we moved over here for just because it's quiet. There should not at all have any kind of a bike trail, any kind of passage way for a bike trail to go behind 623 and our neighbors 620. in Timberleaf Court whatsoever. This is a residential neighborhood, and a bike trail path should not go in a residential area whatsoever.
Thank you for your comments.
We have one more speaker, Alan.
This is Barbara. My husband is Alan, so that's why it says Alan. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. I live on Hillrise Place, original owner, been here, been using those trails up there about 25 years and since we've lived here. And, you know, I know several of the people that talked already, but I'll just bring up a couple more comments since I use those trails pretty much every day. The Timberleaf Trail is very narrow, like Trish was saying. You know, it's only a couple feet in some places. And in the spring, I usually call R2 to do weed whacking because you can't get through there, you know, with the, you know, basically running or walking because of all the weeds. So it's really narrow. The other thing I wanted to talk about is, did anyone ever look at other areas like there, you know, there's all kinds of mountain bike people over there close to Ignacio. Maybe that's where, is that where all the, you know, precious plants are or something, native plants that you're trying to save? I don't know, that's the area, but it seems like there's other areas that don't back up into a neighborhood like lots of other people have said. Parking, you know, I'm the next street down from Timberleaf. You know, we could have a parking issue on our street too, if people know that's an access point to the new mountain bike area. And also, just as a, you know, I go up there to run pretty much, like I said, almost every day. I know a lot of the, you know, bikers can be courteous, but my experience is, and I hate to say this because there's a lot of people that sound like they're courteous people on the call. My experience is the ones I run into are not. If it's a narrow trail and real snaky and you're coming around, you know, you're running up or walking up, you know, I mean, they might come tearing around a corner and, you know, it could be kind of dangerous. So a lot of other points, I don't need to, probably my time's up, reiterate, but like I said, I've used the trails for many years, and my experience with bikers is not that positive. Okay, and thank you for looking at creating trails and stuff on Walnut Creek. I love going up there. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments.
There's no other speakers on this item.
Okay. So at this point, commissioners, we can make our own comments. I think I'd like to propose that we divide the topics and first deal with enforcement, and then deal with the update on the flow trail. Could I get your consent with that? Is that appropriate? Okay. So at this point, let's talk about the enforcement recommendation that Ranger Corey made. Any comments?
Yeah, I guess I have a comment. I just wanted to say thank you, Corey, for the presentation. And I know a lot of thought went into this, and you know, it was raised as an issue at our committee that would be really nice for the Rangers to have a little bit more ability to, when appropriate, have some level of enforcement. And so I really felt like it was well thought out and planned, and I really enjoyed seeing how it's been articulated in his presentation.
Thank you, Commissioner Davenport. Any other comments from commissioners? Commissioner Weston. You're on mute right now.
Okay, there we go. I just want to say that as far as enforcement is concerned,
I very much like the fact that we are focusing on education and trying to get people to do the right thing. Negative enforcement never really works too well. So the positive approach to this, I think, is very helpful, and hopefully use the citation process as just a very minimal thing in the background, just for those super people that need enforcement, and that's the only way that they will learn. But positive, I think, is great.
All right. Any other commissioner comments? Commissioner Kearsley.
Yeah, I just like to kind of reiterate what Commissioner Weston said and Commissioner Davenport said. A lot of thought went into this, and certainly it's never an easy decision to come to anything that would be an affirmative enforcement effort such as citations, but it's certainly warranted for consideration. And I do like what Commissioner Weston said, that positive educational outreach is an important part of this, as well as will be that volunteer patrol program will be a big part of this as well. So thank you.
All right. So I have a very brief comment I'd like to make about the enforcement. I very much appreciate the further thought that went into the proposal, and I think that it's a very balanced approach. Enforcement, the attitude would be it's kind of a citation is the last, hopefully a last resort. Education is the first resort. Talking to people, and I think many of us have already witnessed the positive results that come when we witness our ranger staff talking to groups, whether they're small groups or large groups of bicycles or whoever they're talking to. I think people come away from that better appreciation for the open space and what it takes to be a safe user, and to really feel ownership for that as a Walnut Creek resident. So thank you for doing that. And I also think that this is the one part that with the 5 recommendations that were approved by the commission back in December, this will complete the recommendations that were made. And I think, and I know that the staff is already very well along the lines of implementing as much as they can with the resources that they have. So thank you for that. So at this point, I'd like to see if we have a recommendation, a motion to approve the recommendation for the enforcement as outlined by Ranger Corey.
Chair Oler, we don't need a motion.
Oh, we don't. I
no.
thought we did, since it's since we didn't approve the recommendation on enforcement in December. I thought this was something that we need to approve.
Yeah, we're just asking for your feedback. It seems like there's consensus there anyway, so I think we're okay.
Okay. All right. Very good. Thanks for that. And let's move on to discussion of the flow trail update. Do I have any comments? Commissioner Weston?
I think it's very clear from some of the comments that we had tonight that we need to go back and do a little bit more work before we move forward. There are a lot of very unhappy people in the neighborhood, and they need to be considered. They need to be listened to and their thoughts taken into consideration as we do this. Earlier today, I went up onto to Timberleaf just to see what was up there, and that is just a, I don't know, I think it ought to be just allowed only for pedestrians to walk. There is no room up there. There is no parking.
And one thing that I envision is if you have the trail going behind there, I think the mountain bikers will exit at that and go ripping down Arbolado down to the parking lot. So we need to think very carefully about the trail itself and the impact on the residents in the area, and perhaps about some sort of agreement that may have been made 15 years ago by the city council. So I think we just need to go back to the drawing board and do a little bit more work.
Any other commissioner comments at this point?
Yeah, I just wanted to comment, being a part of the Trails Committee with you, Commissioner Oler, and we, I think a lot of thought and consideration went into this plan, particularly about trying to balance the needs of lots of stakeholders. I think there's no plan that is going to make everybody happy, and there's no guarantee that everyone is always going to follow the rules. But given that what we're trying to do is really preserve the open space, keep the really biosensitive areas intact, and offer people the recreation that they're seeking in a way that is safe and accessible. So I understand that there's some concerns about the trailhead being especially at the end of the Timberleaf Drive, and maybe that could be mitigated by just more emphasizing the trails starting more towards the Boundary Oak. It's only a half a mile. It wouldn't be reducing the bike trail by that much, but I think just really stressing that that's where the parking is. My intuition is that's actually way more accessible. It's unless you're already in the neighborhood, I don't know why you would choose to park at a place that's at a cul-de-sac instead of a nice huge parking lot where there's very accessible to the trails. I imagine the other people are probably people from the neighborhood that might be already using the trails as it is. So I guess I would just love to see this move forward. I think that there's been this demand for a long time about having a safe place for cyclists to use some parts of the open space. And I think that it's a well thought out plan that really kind of balances these multiple factors. And I think as we hear from a lot of people, we could probably discourage parking. I know that there's been other efforts to, just really make sure that the signage is clear and that parking is only technically allowed at the Boundary Oak site. But I really would like to see this moving forward in some way, in an expedited fashion, because I think that what it's doing is it's really taking people off of these trails that are going right through really sensitive natural habitats, and it's offering them instead an opportunity to have recreation in a way that's better for our resources and it helps us preserve our open space the way we want it to be.
Okay, any further comments? Okay, I want to make some comments too. Brief. I'll try to be brief here. I do appreciate everybody that made their comments tonight, and the comments we received in writing prior to the meeting were also appreciated. And I think that there are a couple messages that I heard tonight. One is that the residents in the Rancho Paraiso area are not at all pleased with the proposed location of the trail. But I also heard the bike community saying, please continue to keep us in mind, and your proposal for adding a flow trail would be very well received by the community and would have positive impacts on other parts of the open space, which I think was really the whole idea of this, what went into this for purposes of the Trails Committee discussion. And so it was good to hear that maybe we were making a good proposal for helping the open space. But what I come down to is to ask staff to look again at the flow trail concept, and could there be an alternative way or connection points that would make it very apparent that really the way to enjoy this trail would be to come up through Boundary Oak or the Ignacio Valley parking area, and it would not be in a bicyclist's best interest to head up to Rancho Paraiso Timberleaf entrance. See if there are any ways to do that from a design perspective. Now, in recognition that this is an initial concept and we've made no decisions here, all we've done is ask that we look for an area where we could build an additional flow trail, a flow trail for our biking community. And I think there's been a lot of good energy behind that and a lot of good thought. And I'd just like to see if we can maybe redirect it slightly and hope for better results. Okay, if there are no further comments, then I think we move on to the next agenda item for consideration, which is the 2022 to 2031 10-year capital investment program. And I would like to invite staff to provide presentation at this point.
Good evening, Commission, Chair Aller. My name is Carlton Thompson, and I'm the senior civil engineer for the City of Walnut Creek, in charge of the capital investment program, which includes doing all of the projects that the city funds and constructs. I'm going to share a slide presentation. Okay, can you all see that? Yep, okay. And everyone can hear me, yes? All right, great. So first off, this is a study session. This is one of those presentations where you're not making any decision. I'm going to present some information, and I really am looking forward to seeking and hearing your feedback, as well as that from the public who chooses to stick around for this item. Mike Vickers is going to stick around and help me through some of this because, as you well know, he is very involved in everything to do with our parks, our open space, and including our medians on our roadways and all things that grow in the city of Walnut Creek. So tonight for this item, I'm going to give you an idea of what the CIP work plan and timeline looks like. Mike's going to talk a little bit about some recent projects and some ongoing stuff. I'm going to come back and give you an overview of the CIP in general, what available funding is, and I know that there was a lot of public comment before the meeting about attachment 1 to the staff report. I'll address that just a little bit. And then we're going to go through each of the projects that are proposed in some detail. And a lot of that should be in your packet already, so that you can see how things line up and what is being shown as being funded from in-lieu parkland funds and what is not. So I'm trying to get see where there's concurrence with the commission, where your priorities are, where you are, what's going on with the scope. And then we'll come back to this commission, I think in April, and ask for, where I'll do another presentation, which will be a more refined version of the CIP and the capital budget items that will ask for a recommendation from the commission to go to city council for just the projects in the capital budget and the CIP that are related to parks, rec, and open space work. So here tonight at the study session, April 5th is when I plan to come back to do another presentation and get your recommendation to city council. If for some reason that can't happen, then we'll figure that out. Plan on starting to take to the city council sometime in May to the full council all of the CIP and the first couple sections of that, which is that will be the capital budget. Ultimately, in June of 2021, we're looking for the council to adopt the 10-year CIP and the capital budget along with the city's operating budget. So just going to give you that time frame. This is actually a pretty compressed time frame to get a lot of information. And we just we had a meeting a couple weeks ago with Transportation Commission where we started this. So you're getting the first look at all of those projects that are related to parks and the open space first, before the council gets to see them, because I need your input to pull all of this stuff together from what Mike and I and others have been bantering about internally and looking back towards the previous CIP. All right, Mike's going to come in, hopefully, and talk a little bit about some projects that he's recently done. Are you there, Mike?
Yep. Thank you, Carlton.
Sure.
And good evening, commissioners. So I just wanted to touch briefly on a few projects that have been that were in the last capital budget, and then also the 18-20 capital budget. So phase one, as Chair Oler, as I know you remember very well, you sat on the committee. We went through a planning process, came up with I think 8 different recommendations, and have since then went into design phase. Several of those pieces to that plan that are currently in design and will likely be installed and completed by the end of this fiscal year, meaning June 30th. So we're in really great shape in terms of phase one of Alma Park. And Carlton may touch on this a little bit later when we get into his worksheets. We don't feel that there's going to be the need for a phase two of Alma Park. We think we can get those projects completed through phase one. Just a little bit of background on that. We had some funding that was appropriated through the Recycle Smart fund, and we are waiting on some funding from the Prop 68 park statewide park grant. So we're in good shape funding wise. We're just waiting for that money. The Borges Ranch picnic project is going to be finalized this week. And then we are going to get some volunteers to help us build the shade structure over top of that. We're talking to the Rotary clubs and some others more on a volunteer basis. Turf conversion is 99% complete. We do have some turf work to do around 3 of our baseball/softball infields. We oftentimes, after a few years, find a little bit of a lip where the grass ties into the infield. And so we're going to be repairing that, and that project will be complete. Trail repairs are complete, with exception of one minor issue that we have over at Arbolado Park out in front of the restroom, where the roots have raised up some pavers, minor details. So that project will definitely be complete in the next couple months. Fencing projects are complete. Shade structures, I think I've shared with you guys recently, was either at the December report or certainly through weeklies to council and the pros commission. We have new structures over completed new structures at Diablo Shadows and Rudgear Park. We have 3 structures in Arbolado Park, a 4th one waiting to go in, and then we have to put the shade cloth at Arbolado, and then we'll be complete. Give us 3 to 4 weeks and all those projects will be complete. Studio H Playground equipment was installed 2 or 3 months ago. That is over by the preschool there in Heather Farm Park. And the Tice ball field lighting study is for the most part complete. And that's the update, Carlton.
All right, and then you've got a couple of other projects. I think you mentioned all of this actually.
Yeah, well, with the exception of the, I touched on phase 1 implementation. We should have those up. We should have those recommendations completed by the end of the fiscal year. The 2 to 5 year old playground doesn't mean 2 to 5 years old. It's geared towards ages 2 to 5. That playground equipment and has been posted over there at the park itself. Will start hopefully within the next 6 weeks. We're in contract already. We're waiting for the equipment to be built, and we hope to have the playground completed and opened by the end of spring. And then the parks, open space and trail improvements, which is really infrastructure as a whole as it relates to parks and open space. There's just some minor funding that is remaining in that, and that is going towards the upgrades that we're doing, landscape upgrades that are taking place currently at Northgate, Arbolado, and Heather Farm Park in Ballfield 1. You'll see there, it's probably the biggest project. You'll see that we've put in new irrigation and all new plant material. That parking lot was built back around about 18, 20 years ago, and it was time for an upgrade.
All right, thanks, Mike. One thing that I didn't put on here that I thought about while Mike was talking was Larky Park, the tennis courts, that is in design. It was one of the projects that got put into the FY21 budget. That is well in design, which I hope to get that out to bid sometime in the late February, so that it can get constructed. Of course, when everybody wants to use it in the summertime, but that's the best time to put pavement down and do all the painting and striping too.
Hey, Carlton, can I just add one thing to that, if you don't mind?
Sure.
As I mentioned with the Alma Park project, there is grant funding that is also tied to the tennis project there at Larky, 50,000 or 70,000, I can't remember what it is. And that money is coming in slower. So obviously staff, we want to get it done ASAP. As Carlton mentioned, we're going to get it out to bid. But sometimes it's the funding and we don't have any control. So hopefully this summer is our best bet at this point.
All right.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mike. Stick around because I'm gonna get you for a couple other things. All right. So what is the CIP? We get these terms get interchanged for capital investment program, capital investment plan. And for different communities use them to encompass the budget. And so what is it for us in Walnut Creek? In Walnut Creek, the CIP is the capital investment program, has the budget and the plan. And the plan is that 10-year plan. It's a long-term planning tool, and it goes in 5 2-year cycles. And that's what you have in your packet. You're seeing in those list of projects in a 2-year cycle, and then the next cycle, and the next cycle, and the next cycle. This plan provides vision and defines priorities. So if you fund it, it means it's higher priority. If you don't fund it, it's maybe a little bit lower priority. It doesn't mean you're not going to do it. Maybe it just means that you're looking for funding. Maybe you don't want to use we're not using the in lieu parkland fund for it. Maybe we're seeking some other opportunities like grants. Maybe that's the best way to do that. And in some cases, it could be that the projects are so large that they need to have other considerations to include going out and borrowing funds, which is something the city hasn't done for a capital program in quite a little while, since the 80s. The CIP program manages about $1 billion in city assets. That includes all of roadway pavement, all of the trails that are paved and unpaved, landscaping, parks, park equipment, lights, signals, all that stuff. And we link that whole management of that to the long-term financial forecast by really kind of trying to figure out how much revenue starts to come through the city, how the economy's doing, and then start to have to figure out, okay, how do we start to pay for those things when we want to build those? And that's really a lot of what goes into the CIP. Okay, most importantly for anybody who's listening to this, the CIP does not allocate any funds. It does not accept any funds. It is just a planning tool. It looks at the fund that primarily comes for parks and rec and open space projects, which is the in lieu parkland fund, some general fund, and sometimes we get, as Mike talked about, sometimes we get some money from the state in terms of some of their bond money or grant money for things like that. But the CIP does not allocate any money. There's no authorization there to spend or go do something with the CIP. The capital budget, however, which is approved by council, is a 2-year budget. Council appropriates those funds for those projects, and it's informed by the first 2-year cycle of the CIP, which we're going to go through. So no appropriation is done by the commission. The appropriation is only done at council, which is why you guys are going to get to see this twice. Council will also get to see this twice. And heck, they may be even watching tonight to see get a preview of these projects for themselves. So what goes into, informing the CIP, we got roadway maintenance, buildings, and also the transportation part. I think I said earlier that we went to Transportation Commission a couple weeks ago. The general plan, the planning side, what is in that, we look at that as well. Of course, parks and open space. We also look at, how our infrastructure is doing, our storm drains. And then we also look at, what goes on with parking in downtown and how people come here and visit the city where they can park, mostly in the commercial areas, but sometimes it's in the residentials as well. All those things start to inform projects that will go into the CIP. And then coming out of the CIP is a capital budget. And what goes into the CIP also informs the long-term financial forecast. So we're showing a demand on the funds that the city is showing for revenue, and the long-term financial forecast picks that up and shows out years how much spending the city may be looking, at least from a capital perspective. All right. Any questions so far? Okay. Just want to make sure that I go through this because
Actually, I do have a question, if you don't mind. Can you just say about, so how I know this isn't an budget allocation, but how are the budget estimates derived?
Right. Okay, so budget estimates are derived from a number of things, but mostly because the staff that we build a lot of these kinds of projects all the time anyway. So we have similar projects that we can draw on these estimates from, and where we don't, we start to reach out to others in the industry or that have done similar projects, and we start to pull those numbers together. Now, the further out that project may be, the broader that number may be. And then as we get into the capital budget, those numbers start to really tighten up because that's all we're going to get to spend once council actually allocates it. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, thank you.
Sure. All right, so what goes into the CIP and the parks and open space projects? We've got community input. We've got the 10-year trail plan. We had input from the Bocce committee, and there's a trails committee. There's committees on community gardens. There's committees. There's a 10-year. I think I said a 10-year park plan in here. Asset management. So Mike gives me a lot of feedback about how much it takes to keep maintaining the different assets that are out there. So we do that. And then we also talk to the folks over in Arts and Rec about what their program needs are. So those will come into play here as well. And you're going to see a project or two that starts to really address that. But we gather all that up together and build the 10-year CIP. And since we already have one, really, this is an update to the 10-year CIP. And then again, back to the capital budget out of that. Okay. So funding, some funding, there's a little bit of general fund funding that goes into asset management projects. There's about $3 million per cycle in a normal two-year run at things. That's kind of what we expect. And for COVID has turn things upside down. So as I get deeper into building a capital budget, we'll find out whether that number holds or not. But typically, we also spend in a 2-year cycle about $200,000 for parks and open space, just in asset management. I think that's on a per year basis, right, Mike?
No, that's per 2-year cycle.
Oh, it's a 2-year cycle. Okay. Grants and improvement districts are also another source of funding. Highly competitive for the grant environment, so we're not competitive for a lot of grants, and where there are space for us to compete, there's a lot of applicants for those same grants. And then for our improvement districts and maintenance funds, those are limited in use. Some of them are left over from some of those previous bond measures back in the 80s and before. And so when we get access to those funds, they are usually pretty restricted to doing those things. And most of them really go back towards the roadways or some other things. And then the big thing that funds a lot of the Parks, Rec, and Open Space are the in lieu parkland fees. So these are fees assessed to new and expanded development projects based on land valuation, currently set at about $800,000 an acre. The developers have an opportunity to actually dedicate parkland, but a lot of the developments is small. It's too small to actually put a park of any size on. So the fee is a good way to spread that out to the rest of the community and still get that benefit from that development happening. We anticipate about $3.3 million being available to the Parkland Fund by July 2021. It is still being reviewed by finance. Like I said, this is still an early look at what's going into the capital budget and the CIP. And I'm assuming a projection of about 400 per cycle, but you're going to see as we go through it that maybe I'm using a little bit more than that. Okay. And then Mike talked about the way we've been getting some things done in some of the amenities into the open space and the parks, and that is by using some of the diversion incentive funds, which is a really great thing to be able to go out and buy some of these recycled products, put some demand on that side of the equation, as we all try to really do our job of trying to recycle and reuse the things that we buy and purchase every day. But we've been buying some benches and picnic tables, some of the fencing, shade structures. We've re-roofed a couple of buildings with some recycled metal roofing. If you've been to Shadeland's museum, we replaced that actually with a recycled aluminum roof, I'm pretty sure. It looks really good. So, but these funds aren't there to replace for projects. They're there to augment. Like I said, we've used this to spend for a lot of the amenity and pieces. All right. I think I've kind of hit this a number of times, but we're using a number of different sources to feed the 10-year CIP, the park plan, the pros committees, the pros commission, and one of the things that's also kind of part of this is Your Parks, Your Future, and that will come up as we talk about some of these projects and maybe why we're not doing certain things, or maybe why we're maybe not pushing certain things farther forward. And that's because Your Parks, Your Future, and looking at those big master plans that were part of the CIP and then past capital budgets has been combined into Your Parks, Your Future effort. And that is a big effort, planning effort, to try to figure out what to do in each of one of the big parks. But that whole piece is a result of going through the CIP process in past years. Okay, so the last CIP was the 1828. That was the last one that actually went to commit to the city council and was approved. And so we're going to update that with this 2231. You'll notice that the years are not overlapping in this version. They are sequential, as they should be. And then we're going to focus on the first 2 years. Then we're going to focus on the years 2 through 4, because those are not going to have any. They don't have any capital budget implications. And then years 4 to 6, and then anything out beyond 6 years, you know, we really start to have an inability to focus or forecast any funding. It's okay to have unfunded projects, and it's okay to go, hey, wait a second, what about this? And we have put asset management projects in there to make sure that we're maintaining the quality of the parks and open space for all the users in the community. Okay, so I'm going to overview the project scope. I want you guys to ask questions, provide comments, and prioritize projects. Anybody else got another goal? Are we good? Questions?
I had a question about the in lieu parkland fee. This, you know, I guess I'm just wondering, I'd always thought that that was only for projects that didn't have parkland set aside. And, you know, I know this issue came up about, you know, the issue on the budget for that proposed development of the Seven Hills Ranch land, but it would seem that there's obviously land there. So would it be reasonable to expect that we would ask them to set aside land if any development is happening there? Like, you wouldn't be able to say you can't, like, it seems like it's like if the area would not have development possibilities for any kind of parkland, that I understand the in lieu fee, but it would seem that if there is a bunch of open space already, that we would want them to give us land, not the in lieu fee. Is that wrong, or am I just trying to make sure I'm understanding? Like, you can't just buy yourself out just because you'd rather not? Or is it that you could just pay a fee if you feel like developing every inch of a property?
So that goes through does go through a process with the planning staff and planning commission as well. Okay. But yes, the thought is that projects that are smaller would be able to pay the fee and contribute, and projects that are large enough would have the ability to dedicate. I know that, and I'm not 100% like off the top of my head, but that there is that's the part of the gist of what's in the rules there. So whether they could buy themselves out or not is, I guess, depending on the public process that the project goes through and whether or not that they're allowed to do that. And larger projects go through council, I think, almost all the time anyway. And so council does weigh in on those kinds of things. And in that particular one that came up that we showed on attachment 1, which is the Hale property, the up by Seven Hills Ranch, that project isn't even in the city proper, it's adjacent to. So one of the pieces about that is that that we're not directly involved in granting any approvals for that. We're like another adjacent property owner in that sense to that process. So I don't know if Heather wants to move in and add anything to that.
I just have kind of maybe a very basic question then. If that specific project is the county, the city then can still assume, you know, let's say Jody's point was a very good one, but let's say that it's a normal development. We would still get the in lieu according to the rate that it would be if it was within the city limits. Does that make sense?
We can ask for it, is what I understand, but the county's not obligated to give it to us.
Huh.
Yes, that's correct. Can I chime in here a little bit? That's why it was premature to have that be on table 1. That would be a process where the county would have to agree. They do have a park in lieu, but also it is a senior housing project. So I'm not even sure what their park in lieu fees would be in the county. So it's premature to have that on table 1 for us.
Yeah, that's my fault, and I apologize for that. We typically, when we build this sheet, we put down all the projects that we see coming, and we don't often have them, especially large ones from, you know, from the county. But it's also far enough out there that this projection will get updated a couple of times before it becomes anything that we really are going to really start to think about programming. Like I said, we're just forecasting in attachment 1. We have you know, no idea whether those funds will come in. If you look carefully, you'll see the BART phase 3 or phase 2 projects. I think we've been forecasting those to come into the in lieu parkland for about 2 or 3 CIP cycles. So, you know, it just, and they're still not here. So that's kind of what, but other things start to fill in. Okay, so back to the goals. Everybody good with where we're headed?
Actually, Carlton, I have a question for you. Along the lines of prospective parkland, in lieu parkland fees, where is I saw on there the DMV property. Where is that in consideration now? Is that also in similar early stage as a proposal, or I don't know?
Yeah, I believe they haven't, I'm not 100% sure, but I believe they have not gained any entitlements yet. They're still in that early planning stage to get those. And I think we're showing, yeah, sometime in, you know, 24, 25, that it might come in for permits somewhere in that neighborhood. It may be faster than that, but it probably wouldn't be any earlier than that.
Okay.
But that's just, that's us guessing and just trying to keep track of them.
Okay.
All right. We're good? All right. This is going to be a long item. There's a lot of stuff to talk about. All right. So I'm going to go through these worksheets. And these first couple are really, you're going to see more than once. Because if you look at this, this is the CIP worksheet for park infrastructure repairs. And it shows in each of the 5 budget cycles, 400,000 of in lieu parkland funding going towards maintaining the parks and open space or park infrastructure pieces, and for a total of $2 million at the end of a 10-year cycle. So that's one of the first projects you see in 22-23, and it shows, you know, we use that stuff for fencing, paved trails, irrigation, and playground equipment, and et cetera. And this is really that capital budget worksheet. Basically the same thing. So I've got 2 different documents that I'm building here. So you're going to see 2 different worksheets for the stuff in the capital budget. You're going to see the capital budget worksheet, and you're going to see the CIP worksheet. Okay, this is for the open space. And we've been spending a little bit of money in some of the previous capital budgets on the open space. And this again is an asset management one focused on the open space. Rotational grazing program, I think I got mentioned a little bit. Preserving the current stock pond signage, trails. We have some pedestrian bridges out in the open space as well. But each of the budget cycles gets $150,000 to $100,000 over the course of the 10-year program, about $600,000. And for the 22-23, we're showing $150,000 going towards that effort. I'm showing you meeting upgrades, mostly because Mike's staff does a lot of that work, or does all that work. And it does affect, you know, how they are able to do other things, but it doesn't have any impact on the in lieu parkland money, but it is how we're spending some of the general fund money for, you know, those medians and all that landscaping that you see as you drive in and out of town and, you know, across town. it does help reduce the water consumption that the city uses. And here's the capital budget worksheet for the same thing. All right, here's a good one. Quartz resurfacing projects. So we know we're doing Larky in the FY21 budget, and we are looking at putting some additional funding in the next 2 budget cycles towards Quartz. We're going to go out to Heather Farm. I see I have a spelling error in there, dang it. And spend some money out at Heather Farm. And then in 24-25, I think you'll see that we'll go out to Arbolado and Red Gear. You're going to see those worksheets, and you'll see them come up in the table, which will come at the end of all these worksheets, for a total of $1.1 million into Quartz over the next 2 budget cycles. And here's the capital budget worksheet, first draft for Heather Farm, and it does a lot of things like trying to repair a lot of these cracks and then recolor and repaint the lines on these courts.
Carlton, do you want comments as you go, or hold them to the end?
Art, I would love to have them as we go.
Okay. Well, questions first. What drives the timing decision on these?
For Heather Farm, for sure, I'm getting, that's a high priority with the Arts and Rec staff internally. We've heard that's a high driver for the folks that are talking to them every day. So the program staff are telling us that getting out and doing Heather Farm courts is a high priority right now. There are a few that probably could use a little bit more work. It's been a little bit since I think the last time we were out there to do the to do a full resurfacing. We just built a couple new courts out there, but we put that pickleball court out there. But we haven't gone back in and really overlaid or addressed some of the other courts that didn't get attention in the 18-20 budget cycle.
And the other question is, I look back at notes from the previous cycle, and the placeholder for Heather Farm was $500,000 rather than $750,000. So just interested if you have any information on why that might have changed.
Yeah, I went back and looked at some of those budget numbers and we adjusted them. And we'll look at these again, actually, before you see them. I'll get our guys to really go back in and look at what we're going to get for the Larky bid, and see if we're holding that same number or not. Yeah, trying to get actually contractors to do courts right now has been tough. The school districts have had a bunch of bond money, and so it's been really hard to get contractors to do some of our projects and give us good, really good pricing on them, because they're very busy.
Well, they were able to do the Northgate court. Somebody was, so that's a good sign.
Yeah, no, we eventually get them done, but
I don't know what
Art,
okay.
I just wanted to add a couple things. One of the other aspects that goes into these courts that Carlton and I and Karen, who runs the Lifetime Tennis Program, are finding is, we not only have court challenges and court issues, our fencing around those courts are starting to curl up and becoming more of a hazard or not so effective. And then we've got tree roots that are pushing up trails that are adjacent to the courts itself. So it's, with the additional funding, and I'm sure it'll be competitively bid, but that additional funding will go into some of the other infrastructure that is immediately around those courts, just to ensure that they're safe and the infrastructure is up to date.
Good info, thanks.
Any other questions from anyone?
Yeah, I have a question regarding, it just occurred to me looking at these courts, are we obligated by contract with Lifetime Tennis to keep the courts at a certain level Because I know there's referenced about, tournaments that require, certain services. Are we actually obligated by contract?
Mike's gonna answer that one for me.
Actually, I know Kevin Safine is available, or I'm hoping he's available, because I don't know that contract well enough. I don't think we're obligated. This is a picture here of actually Rudgear courts, just an old recycled picture, and those courts are in that condition now. That's one of the reasons why we've kind of struggled of trying to find a balance with the funding, and it's not just funding, it's manpower. How much staff time can we devote to some of these things as opposed to roadway improvements and other things like that? So Kevin would have to weigh in, and we could follow up if he's not on the line with us now, but I don't think we're obligated to. I think that we do it to ensure the program is successful and that the community is safe.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so I'm going to get to the next project, which is a new project, which is Arbolado Park improvements. And what you're seeing is a project that is to look at the park conceptually for a portion that's underutilized, and get some input, do some environmental work, and then we're projecting in 26-27 that we would put some Inland Parkland Fund money in to actually build the improvements. So this is similar to what was done with Alma, so that's kind of where we're at. You're going to see that in the budget cycles as well. But in this next year, we want to kick off the process of getting out to the public, start to talk about, conceptually how we would make some use of that park, or the underutilized portion of the park. And this is the capital budget worksheet for that project, and it's only showing $50,000 for that first effort. And then here is the all-weather sports fields project. This one's been bouncing around on the CIP for a little bit, trying to get it done. And I know that the community is very highly wants to have some all-weather sports fields out there. I think in the package for the commission, you saw some support for that. And we are actually showing not spending any Inland Parkland funding towards it, but showing that the community is going to raise the $3.5 million. It could be less than that. That is an old number gained towards the ball fields 5 and 6 when that estimate was put together. But we've also seen prices increase and contracting costs increase. So we didn't adjust that number at this point. Really, we'll go back and look at it post this meeting, but we think that number's in the right ballpark for sure, for putting some all-weather sports field out there by ball fields 1 and 2. Okay. Any questions?
For the ball field, is there do you have a sense of the longevity of these fields? Because I know when it had come up before, one of the concerns was that they only last about 8 to 10 years and then they need to be completely replaced.
Yeah, that's what I understand as well, is that they have an 8 to 10 year lifespan on them. It really depends on how much they get played on and what else happens to them. But yeah, the surface of them can get pretty bent. I have all weather at my own house, and so I've got quite a bit of experience with what they look like. And yeah, 10 years is pretty good when you got a bunch of kids playing on it, and dogs and people and stuff.
So has there been any commitment to like the, I guess making sure that at the end of the 10 years that there's funds to either rehabilitate it back to how it was or pay for another 10 years?
I'll let Mike talk about that. I think he's been a little more involved in the conversations than I have.
Yeah, good question, Commissioner Davenport, and a couple things. One, first of all, in terms of the community raising the funds, more specifically, it is the Walnut Creek Soccer Club that has stepped forward and said that they are going to work to raise those funds. It's not the community as a whole, to the best of my knowledge. And secondly, in regards to the recarpeting in 8 to 10 years, in fact, the quality of the material is getting better. Depending on your use, you can get as much as 12 years out of them now, you're saying, and you may have to go back and just replace the goal mouths or some minor wear areas in order to increase that lifespan. But regardless of the length of time, as you know, the numbers and the fees are run through the recreation program. The recreation director, Kevin Safine, is 100% engaged, and along with Jim Carlson, who's the manager. And there are different ideas at this point, or different options, potential resolutions to this, to raising those funds. One, it can be done through hourly fees, which are what some neighboring communities do, including the community that I live in. The other is asking to potentially raise some of that funding going into the beginning of the project and the overall fundraising. So some of that money can be set aside. The other is continue to charge as we normally do. And when we get to that, that replacement, carpet replacement time, we use some other sort of fees and ask council for some of their direction and guidance moving forward.
Thank you.
All right, so that's the end of the first 2-year cycle and all the projects that are included there. And so this portion of the table would be what makes up those items that would go into the capital budget. And you see I already have draft worksheets built for those. You can see that I'm estimating that by the end of 23, we probably have about $4 million available. And that, we're only programming to spend out of the In Lieu Parkland Fund about 1.3 million. That leaves some left over for future projects. So any comments on this? Anything that we want to talk about here? Do you want me to keep going?
I have a real quick question now for me to answer. How does the 400,000 that seems to be every 2 years with the infrastructure and the 200 or 150 with the open space, how does that compare to 2 years before, 2 years before, 2 years before that? Is that kind of in line with what you guys have come to expect? Mike, you might be the guy for that one.
Yes, I think so. In fiscal, or the last capital budget was a 1 year.
Right.
There was $100,000 set aside, and 50,000 of that was grant funding, as I mentioned earlier, from the Prop 68 grant that we're still waiting on. The 2 years prior to that, there was $150,000 set aside for a number of trail projects and infrastructure improvements. That would be the 1820, and before that, to be upfront with you, I can't remember before that. So there has been this will be the third that I know for certain, the third request in the third cycle that funding has been requested.
At about the same level, if
Yes.
you compare the 2 years to 1 year or whatever. Got it. Thanks.
Yes.
Mike.
Yeah, looking back at some of the previous ones, they weren't always maybe consolidated into one item. They were spread out between a couple of different items. They might have been spread out a little bit, but overall, it's about the same amount. Okay, so I'm going to move on to the next one, and we're going to see some other projects. Just as a reminder, the park infrastructure repairs, open space repairs, the median upgrades will continue, and you'll also see that court resurfacing. So those asset management projects will be repeated in the next budget cycle. So I won't necessarily repeat those worksheets each and every time. Okay, I'll shorten the slides down a little bit. Okay. Here you go. So here's a different asset management one, which is to replace the playground surfaces at the All Abilities Playground. That's coming up from when we put that in before. So this is not to rebuild it completely, but to really replace the top surface of that. As you can see from the worksheet, it was put in 2014. It sees a lot of visitors, and so this is that replacement question that Commissioner Davenport brought up. What do you have to do to maintain some of these things? How long does that happen? This is one of those items. You can see right now we're showing, at least this worksheet showing it's unfunded, and so this would be in that next budget cycle.
Yeah, I was going to ask a question.
Go ahead.
So the All Abilities Playground gets significant use, and so do the Heather Farm tennis courts. I just want to make sure that we're picking the right one to go first, or whether we need to potentially move this one into the 22-23, because we're nearing end of life on some of that playground equipment.
Carlton, can I respond?
Yes, please, Mike.
Good question, Chair. Right now, the playground surfacing is slightly starting to unravel, meaning the UV rays are starting to break up basically the binder that holds the wear layer together. And so if you were out there to look around the edges, you start to see a lot more of crumbled rubber that's getting out into the grass and getting onto the concrete. However, we feel that over the next couple of years, we're going to be comfortable with the wear and tear. The spring action, there's a proper term for it. It's not spring action, but the fall zone, we feel has not become more compact than it should be. So the playground surfacing itself is still okay in terms of buoyancy. And in fact, we'll reevaluate this at the beginning of 23 when we're doing the capital budget, and hopefully we can push it out 2 more years if we stay on top of the maintenance and be able to get the products out there to kind of block the UV rays. So at this point, I think it's where it should be at. Hopefully we can push it out to 26, 27 when we get closer to that period.
Okay, thanks, Mike. Any other questions about this one? Okay. This worksheet starts to, we'll probably start a big discussion, but I think the last time we came, we kind of showed Your Parks, Your Future projects, and we danced around the pool and the bathhouse and the stuff that was coming out of Your Parks, Your Future. I've decided to really put this in there to really get this conversation moving along, mostly because at the end of December, there was some summaries that went to council that, and some of that's right here, which was to prioritize the Heather Farm Park facilities and the community center and around the pool and getting this thing done. So at least as far as this first initial brush at looking at the Heather Farm Aquatic Center and Community Center, I'm showing in the worksheet something different than you haven't seen in the other ones, which I'm showing a 14-16 column there. That reflects that there was money put in for design in 2014 and 16 in the capital budget of $1 million. And actually there's a little bit more than that sitting in there. And it's one-time money to start the design process. And I'm projecting out in 24-25. So this is the budget cycle that we're talking about, that will start the design work. And I'm anticipating that the design effort for a fully, big pool, maybe the community center, the bathhouse, the combination project, the $50 million project would happen. You got to do the design work first so you can get it out to bid, and then you'll chew on scope and everything like that. And then construction would hopefully follow the very next budget cycle, because it will take all those engineers and designers and the community and all of that, I think a full budget cycle to have that conversation. And so I'm showing a $50 million project and showing an additional $7 million in design. I think it's going to take $8 million for design. I already have one. And then about $42 million in construction to actually construct whatever pool that gets decided. And this number could go lower if they change, if things change. It could also be higher depending on the size of the community center and whether or not it gets combined or not. So this worksheet has some implications big time into the larger CIP and capital budgets going down the road. But it also starts to set up the conversation about how do you pay for something this large in the community. And so what you should also recognize in looking at the fund is that there's no way the In lieu Parkland Fund can just fund this thing. I'm showing no in lieu Parkland money going towards this at this time. One, because it's not in the capital budget, so I really don't have to. But two, that it is such a big number. And when you look at the revenue forecast, you see that we never really even get to the fully $7 million number, even if you didn't spend any money on anything else. So that's this item. And I have to start somewhere. And I think the next one has to do with, yeah. So any questions about this one before I move on? I see Art smile.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Yeah, Carlton, did you take into consideration your Parks, Your Future guidelines? Because we had separated out this infrastructure, the structures, the physical structures versus the pool in terms of estimates and so on. Did you take a look at that? Because it looks like, am I reading this right? It's all, you got it all combined into one?
I did. I did look at least I looked at the summary table that was presented. I think council saw that thing in December, right? And I went back and I looked at those estimates, looked at the highs and lows for each of the square footage estimates, and combined them in. It can come in lower than 50 million, and it could come in a little higher than 50 million all total. And that was based on the consultant's estimates, really. So we haven't really dug in to do a real engineering estimate yet with, any of the folks that we would probably hire for this. And remember, when I talk about design, I'm talking about the staff's not going to design this thing. We're going to go out and get consultants to do the whole, it's specialty design, specialty construction. So, but yeah, we looked at that whole recommendation stuff.
Okay.
Can I add something to that, Commissioner Kearsley? It was, after we updated council, or Janine with planning updated council in regards to the whole project, it was one of council's priorities to focus on the aquatic center, the bathhouse, and the community center. And so that's why we combined that number, because it was noted as a priority for council.
Okay, thank you.
So I had a question. It just seems a little puzzling that we're putting these placeholders in when I thought the official word was your parks, your future was on hold. So what does on hold mean in terms of budget?
I'll let Mike answer this.
So, and Heather may need to weigh in on this as well, but so the project is on hold. We have suspended the consultant's contract till we get past COVID and kind of figure out where we're, what our priorities are moving forward. We're anticipating this project picking back up again, hopefully in the fall of 21 or the spring of 22. That'll depend on council's direction and council's goals. But we hope that it does pick back up again and we can move through the second phase of it. Sorry, there was a second part to that question, Art.
How does being on hold translate in budget terms? Yeah.
Yeah. So
sorry, go ahead, Carlton.
I was going to say that you in the 10-year CIP, I have to start to show this project or the demand on a project of this size. It seemed to me pretty apparent that council was committed to doing something. So in terms of it, because there is no budget, right? We're talking about the investment plan, not necessarily not the budget. So this doesn't commit any funds. It just starts to say to our finance and our community, hey, this is how much money we need to start to develop to do a project of this scope. So in terms of budget, and because I'm not showing any in lieu parkland fund being spent towards it, it really doesn't affect the budget in terms of the capital budget piece of it. But it does start to show that there's a big project out there that we need to figure out how to fund if it continues to move forward through the rest of the process.
Fair enough. Fair enough. So I made some public statements back when we were working on this year and a half or so ago about the bathhouse being, kind of ready to fall down if you lean against the walls. And what I've learned as the pools reopened this past fall is you don't really need a bathhouse anymore because we're not allowed to use them. All you need is a restroom. So I think we should take the bathhouse out of the project and just have some nice restrooms and save the city a lot of water for running showers. That's just a offhand comment.
Sir. Anyone else?
I'll just make the point that I think that this is the right decision. You got to put it somewhere, and it was, before all this started, this was a major push from the council, because it needs to be done, and yeah, it remains true that it's not in the budget, and we don't know where the money's going to come from, but to not put it in there, I think, would not be the right decision either. Right. So not to say that we're kicking the can down the road, but it's something that should be dealt with one way or another. And I think putting it on where it is a good start. That's what I think.
Okay, thanks. I think that was a big question of mine, is whether or not 24-25 to start design was the right time frame.
I just got to add that I think actual events will dictate what happens here, and it could be a lot sooner than later. So we'll see.
Is there any implication for, I guess I'm just still wondering, is there any implication for not separating out the different pieces of this? I'm still having them as a band, but having them listed separately versus having it be one huge project.
Right. So I think for this document, the plan document, the bigger project is kind of got the bigger number associated with it. So I'm kind of trying to show, hey, here's that big number that maybe that target. And as we start starting to figure out how to fund the design side of it, maybe that value engineering piece comes in, that whole conversation about, do we really need a bathhouse or not, to Art's point, and some other considerations start to happen. And maybe this project does, become a little easier to swallow, or maybe it becomes something else. And maybe there's some, some big fundraising that happens and some really great things. And all of a sudden we get this really great project, big project out there. But I think that to show a portion or to break it up into other pieces seemed to be confusing the last time we had this conversation in 2019, because I showed a little bit here and a little bit there. And even going into this presentation, I had a couple of, and I had another project that I was going to propose, which was going to show, some of the ancillary stuff that has to happen with when the bathhouse current stuff does go away and you go start to build a project out there. The All Abilities Playground uses the bathrooms at the community center and the swim center as well. There's got to be a bathroom out there somewhere. The basketball courts have to move. That parking lot is going to go away or has to change. There has to be some other ancillary projects that go along with that. And as we kind of bantered that around, we decided that right now we would just focus on this conversation. And then as we come back for future CIPs and we talk more capital budget stuff, that we would have more of and as Your Parks, Your Future moves forward, we'd have a better idea about what to do with some of those other things rather than trying to break them apart at this point. So that's why I chose to do it this way. It obviously isn't the only way to do it. And if the commission felt strongly one way or the other, I'd break it apart and do what you ask. Because I'm trusting that you know how to communicate to the community and with the council sometimes better than I do. But I had to start somewhere.
This is really helpful context. I appreciate it.
Sure.
Clarification.
Okay, I'm going to jump to the next one, which isn't nearly as exciting. This is a combo project. Really, it was two, and Mike and I decided to put it into one. One, because they are a little bit related. And that park irrigation, there's an irrigation reservoir out at the backside of Heather Farm that is leaking, and it's been leaking. So we need to figure out a way to repair the pond so it's not leaking anymore. And then after that, there are some pumps that pump from that pond out to the irrigation system. And there is an aeration system for the nature lake in the middle of Heather Farm that also needs some work done to it. So we have proposed in here a kind of a combo project that covers both of those, at least as far as the CIP, to show that there's a bunch of money to be spent on those items that are really infrastructure related. And the cost estimates that I have for those are based on prior projects, not on the leak piece, but on the pumps and the aeration fountains. We know how much they cost the last time we did those or when those went in. And so we were able to kind of forecast what they might be costing in 24, 25, and 26, 27. So that's what's in this CIP project to come up to start in fiscal year 24, 25. All right, this project I think was in your packet, and you may or not seen this version of it, but it basically is what we were talking about doing Alma Park. And Mike has already said that we figured out how to do it all in one phase now. So this is not going to be reflected in the tables, at least it shouldn't. and going forward, but the worksheet was in there, so. Okay. Bocce courts. So I know there was previous meetings, we've had conversations about bocce courts and when to build them and how to build them and do all these things with it. We've done the design for them. We know kind of how they were going to go in, and putting them in at Rudgear and Larkey were the two places that were recommended. So right now I'm forecasting those going in 24-25 and 26-27. We hope that there's demand to use them still. So, and we're going to hang with that $200,000 per facility to build them cost.
Carlton, what, and maybe other people, wasn't the estimate for to do at least one of them a lot higher than that? Or am I misremembering?
Yeah, I thought it was 400,000 for at one facility, or 2 courts, 1 location. Is that right?
Depending on the type of surface you use, I think is one of the key considerations. And that drives maintenance too.
Yeah,
Whether
and the
it's like the
grading
shells
goes
or
along
the-
with it and the irrigation design. So we've gotten that stuff worked out now in terms of we kind of know better about how they're going to fit, what it's going to take to put them in. And then looking at some of the different materials, and we're hoping that the user group out there will help maintain some of that stuff. So anyway, we're programming them now to start getting some construction done in 24-25. And I am showing in the Parkland Fund against them out in that time frame. Does that still work for the? Is that? Okay. And that's the second 2-year cycle. I'm showing that potentially we could see almost $2 million in 24-25, depending on development pop in. Based on the previous cycle spending, we would end up starting out in 24 with about $4.1 million potentially, and we would spend close to $2 million in the 24-25 budget cycle. Without spending anything on the design for the aquatic center. That's that $7 million of unfunded. Any questions for this one? All right. Old Oak Park, this is at the end of Rossmore, or the north end of Rossmore Parkway. We have put some money in there. I think this is for the parking lot, right, Mike?
Yeah, there's $25,000 set aside in the 1820 for a trail that's going to be built this spring. So that project will be complete by the end of the fiscal year, and the additional funding is for a potential parking lot, and that's why we pushed it out. There is adequate parking at Tice Valley Park. There's a restroom there and other facilities. It's not that far, and so we're trying to work those ideas out, and that's why we push this off.
And one thing that we have a hard time doing in the Bay Area is building parking lots, especially paid parking lots, because you end up with a clean water project associated with it that you have to build as well. And having built a few of those with the development community, sometimes those clean water facilities are as expensive as the parking lot itself. So we want to be careful about what we do with parking lots.
There really isn't any room for a parking lot over there, is there?
I think there's a small one, the ability to put a small one in there, but it would come with some grading and maybe some retaining wall. Okay. And that really is the only other new project in that budget cycle from stuff that you haven't seen already. And this is the budget cycle, though, where the swim center construction and the $42 million comes in. That's that $42 million of unfunded. But pretty much showing spending, funding the rest of the projects to include the actual improvements at Arbolado, if that project generated from the design and community input, it generated something, we would be programming that in 26, 27. Any questions about this cycle? A few years out. All right. This next project is the Walden Park parking lot expansion. I think this one also has pushed out from, I think we were going to try and do that this year in previous conversations. And this would just pushes that project off out into 28, 29. I think we're not seeing that we actually have to do that right now. And so we are, like I said, just prior to that, doing parking lots comes with some clean water and storm drain infrastructure that has to get built along with them. So if we can not expand them, then we don't incur that extra expense. Any questions about this one?
Yeah, I had a question. Is parking allowed on the main drag that Walden's on? Is it Oak or the road that it's located on?
Yes.
Is parking permitted on the road there?
I think that there's some parking down on that street, but not right in front of the park because of the trail crossing. There's some restriction for parking for sight distance for the trail. Am I right?
Art, I can speak to that. I run on that trail all the time. There's not a lot of parking. There's close to, if you're getting out of your car with your stroller and your 4 kids, it's you want a spot in that lot. You can park down closer to Treat, but a lot of it is taken up by all of the condos that are up and down there. So there's not a ton on Oak right there. You can find it, but you're going to be walking for a while.
Yeah. Okay.
Any desire to move this thing further, up to back to up a budget cycle, or to leave it right where it is? Okay. And this is out to 28, 29. And that shows still continue to commit to maintaining our infrastructure with some of the Inland Parkland Fund, as well as potentially building this parking lot expansion. And then we get to Tice. So we did the study, and I have a preliminary design for lighting out there that we just got from the consultant this past week. We haven't really looked at it yet. And it includes some ability to do the soccer field and maybe some sand volleyball courts, because we kind of wanted them to study the entirety of things that the program staff was talking about might be out there. But this does not include any all-weather surface or synthetic turf out there. This is just to put the light towers up, to get the lighting in, to get the transformers done with PG&E, to get that kind of stuff done, to light it up so that you could, hold events out there, soccer events out there. That $1.6 million number is probably still good, but we will look at it again, especially once we get done looking at what the consultant gave us, and then forecasting that number forward into that budget cycle, which is 10 years out. But that's where it's sitting right now. Mostly it got moved because we're now talking about doing all weather surface at Heather Farm. So we pushed this one out to see if there's still going to be a demand out there, but didn't want to lose sight of the fact that we had actually done something in terms of trying to study at least the feasibility of putting lighting out there, not the environmental side of the lighting. But we at least had to look to see whether or not it was even feasible to do it and what it would take to actually, you know, put lights up and put power to them. Okay.
I thought this originally was a partial discussion about lights for the baseball field.
Yeah, I think you're right.
About that?
Yeah, if you don't mind me touching on that, Commissioner Weston, I believe you're talking about lights for the baseball field out at Tice. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah, so that the baseball field, and I may have confused you in the past when I was talking about this. The baseball field itself has not been used in at least the last 12 years. The field is just too small. It is only the only use for that field out there now is whether it's soccer or lacrosse or camps or something along that nature. What was being proposed was removing the baseball infield and putting 3 sand volleyball courts in that area and lighting the courts. Baseball was not and is not part of Tice's future as we move forward.
Oh, that's fine. And I like the idea of the sand volleyball courts. I just hadn't even heard that part yet either. So, but I think that's good.
Again, this project's out there far enough that it will probably change again as we get closer to moving it into a budget. But we at least have completed the study of being able to whether or not we can put lights out there or not, what it takes to do that. So we have something now to start that conversation on, and we can move forward with it. Okay, so the last budget cycle, continuing the asset management pieces, and then just showing this one project. We're also showing it unfunded right now. And you can see that the estimated available funds will only be $3.3 million. And you know, our anticipated revenue dropped off. If you were noticing and you look in your packet, you'll see that in that previous year, and I'll roll back, I only showed about 150,000 because that's one of the projects. And this is where that Hale property piece came in, because right in that time frame is where if that was a true project and we were going to get it, I would have shown $770,000 in there or something like that. And I didn't, because I only showed this 150, 772. But that just shows you that we also can't estimate out that far, really, based on the projects that are coming in. And still, these anticipated revenues are still very much guesses, because we don't know really when the development's going to come in and actually pay those fees and make them available to us. So that's the last 2-year cycle. And I got one last slide here for you, and that is projects that they're not included, that maybe from a previous CIP that we had on there. You might be going, well, where did that go? We didn't maybe do all of that. LaRue Phase 2, Mike and I think that project, the second phase of that, is something that we should talk about, whether or not that should happen or not, or whether it should be included at least in a 10-year. I didn't show any more money for community gardens. We talked about Alma Phase 2 already. And then Heather Farm and Civic Parks master plans. If you looked in the 1828, you would see the 1828 CIP, you would see that there were Heather Farm and Civic Park master plans pieces in there. Those got combined into Your Parks, Your Future. I think you already know that. Just kind of making sure that the public is aware of that. And then in an out year, there was something for Heather Farm batting cages. That also was something that's, you know, getting revisited for the Your Parks, Your Future, and that whole and any of those other ancillary projects. So I pulled that out of this update. I didn't feel like it was appropriate to keep continuing on something that, you know, we still don't know what's, you know, what that would really look like at Heather Farm. And Mike, I don't know if you want to talk any more about any of those to include LaRue.
No, I think you touched on it. I mean, phase 2, I don't know if the commissioners remember or not, but phase 2 at LaRue included a parking lot. No, sorry, it included a playground and a restroom and a large picnic area. And we're just not seeing the demand at all for those needs. And not only that, you know, we're struggling to figure out how we're going to maintain that infrastructure when we have many of these other pieces that are highly used. Community gardens, there's actually a budget item from the 16-18 budget. And there's about $50,000 that is still in our capital budget. And we may come to you in the future and just try and clean that up, whether we reallocate that funding or it just rolls back into the Park and Lieu Fund. We'll figure that out when we get there. And that's all I had to add, Carlton.
All right, thanks, Mike. Okay, so now I'm going to conclude.
Before we move, question about bocce at Heather Farm. Is that thrown in under one of the others, or did we just eliminate that?
I think that was also part of that discussion about, you know, where Your Parks, Your Future, and what comes out of where things go as part of those other parks. I was confident enough to put in the pool because that was something that we've been talking about with council, and that was one of their priorities. But any of those ancillary projects, to include putting in bocce or anything else that might come out, I left those off the table for now until we get more direction out of the Your Parks, Your Future. And I felt like bocce at Heather Farm was in that same vein.
Okay, just as long as it's not forgotten.
Got it. And so I think, you know, tonight I'm just asking you guys to ask questions, which you've been doing, provide your comments, and I'll come back to pros after having reviewed and distilled all of this discussion and your comments. And I think after this, we'll take some public comment. But whatever questions you have left over, you know, shoot.
Well, I think it worked to do it on the run, questions on the run. So I think sounds like we're there. Maybe we shift now to public comments. Commissioners, everybody good with that? Okay, so I'll take silence as agreement. I can't see anybody else right now. I just wanted to say before we open up to public comment that we did receive some written commentary in advance of the meeting and appreciate those that provided that. Specifically, it was from Walnut Creek Aquatics and from Walnut Creek Soccer Club. So thank you very much. So I asked the question, does any member of the public wish to provide public comment at this time? Please use the raise hand feature or press *9 if you're connected by audio only, if you'd like to provide a public comment. And I'll ask Secretary Bollinger whether we have any comments.
No.
We do not have anybody raising their hand to speak, but we did want to make a quick announcement on.
I did see one person hand raise.
Oh, okay.
No.
We have one, but prior to that, we also want to make an announcement on the written comments.
I'd like to note for the record that comments were received for this item by Michael Young, Doug Carlberg, and Brian and Tammy Lytle, and those comments were distributed and are posted on the city website. And I'd also at this time like to note for the record that comments were received from Bob Wynn and Julia Schmidt. And those comments were also distributed to you and posted on the city website. And that was for the first item, item 4A.
Thank you for that update.
We have Steve Chappelle.
Steve, you're still on mute. Steve, still showing mute for your input. I guess there may be some technical difficulties we didn't anticipate. I don't know what the reason.
So we'll see if Steve can unmute his mic and we'll put him back in the queue. And now Bob Simmons would like to speak.
Okay, now I do. Heather, this is perhaps partly to you. I submitted about 3 o'clock today a written comment to public comments at walnutcreek-org. Was that not received by you?
Yes, it was received and distributed to the commissioners.
Okay, I didn't hear it referenced when you went through and the other person went through the list of people who had submitted a comment.
They were received after 4 o'clock. The ones that there was several written comments that were received before 4 o'clock that went to the commissioners.
Okay, so the ones that were received before 4 o'clock went straight to the commissioners and weren't mentioned today.
We did make mention that we had received numerous comments. And Bob, this is our, we did at the beginning of the meeting, I don't know if you were on then, make an announcement that that there was some confusion over the numbers for our in lieu parkland funds, and that the particular property that you discussed, the development, was inappropriately listed on attachment 1. It was not in the numbers we were using for the program review in attachment 2.
So I thought the comments I submitted dealt with the need to address the riparian resources of Heather Farm Park. And it is possible I may have, actually, I'm pretty sure I sent the right document, the right materials to you. And I did not intend to reference at all the Seven Hills Ranch property issue.
That was the only communication we received, as far as I'm aware, on the Seven Hills Ranch development.
Wow. Okay. I know I did not submit a comment on Seven Hills Ranch. I submitted a comment on item 4B. And specifically on the item on Arbolado, and suggested that one of the things I was hoping that the Pros Commission would do was to recognize the importance of addressing the riparian resources of Heather Farm Park, recognizing that there are 3 streams that go into Heather Farm Park that are in a degraded condition, that the natural lagoon there is in serious need of being dredged out, and that, among other things, Mount Diablo Audubon considers Heather Farm Park to be a hotspot, a birding hotspot, and that I was encouraging the city, for reasons I didn't state, but Heather and I have had a number of conversations about over the past, that it was really important for the city to start addressing the need to restore the riparian resources of Walnut Creek, and specifically in the category and the situation of Heather Farm Park. One of the 3 creeks goes past the gardens at Heather Farm and has a fence right along the top bank of the creek. One of the creeks comes from the Ignacio Plaza development and is chock full of reeds and other things, so it doesn't really flow well. Plus, it's not really attractive as a creek. And the 3rd one really comes from above the greenery development, fairly close to where the Ignacio Canal entry is, and that again is really not well enhanced. And then as you go as the outlet from the natural lagoon out of Heather Farm Park to the end of Heather Farm Park, right where the Contra Costa Canal Trail is, that particular 100-foot section, a rather degraded section of trail, and there's a dispute whether it's East Bay Parks or City of Walnut Creek, and I understand the dispute, is actually in the wetland area that is adjacent to the creek. It needs to be moved out of that. I'm only highlighting all these points that I thought I had submitted to you in writing. I apologize if you didn't receive it, because I believe it is important for the city to start taking a look at its riparian resources. I will conclude, by the way, by simply, but with 2 things. One, there's an author that was one of the seminal authors of the environmental movement, Lauren Isley, who wrote a book called The Immense Journey, who said, quote, "If there is magic in this planet, it is in water." The second thing I will note is this is Walnut Creek. And I apologize if you didn't see those comments. I will re-forward them to Heather with the hope that you will have a chance to see them all. My wish was that you would recommend to the city that it needs to pay more attention to the riparian resources of Walnut Creek, the degraded condition they are in, and specifically start the process of studying the riparian resources of Heather Farm Park with a view to improving and enhancing them over time. And I thought that was more important than the planning, the study work that was planned for Arbolado. Thank you for allowing me to expand it. And I noticed I didn't have a timer on this, so I tried to keep it short.
Thank you for your comments, Bob.
Chair Oler, for the record, we did receive Bob's note.
Okay, then my mistake. Sorry about that.
Yes, thanks for that clarification. And they were posted to the website.
Okay. Yeah, there was a lot of paper shuffling going on late this afternoon.
Thank you.
So we're trying to get back Steve Chappell.
Steve, we're not able to hear you. You're still on mute.
Hi, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Jeez, I'm so sorry. Apologies for the technical problems. Sure, all our commissioners, city staff, thank you for your patience. Thanks for spending the night and presenting as well on the agenda items. My name is Steve Chappell. I'm the general manager of the Walnut Creek Surf Soccer Club, and we're the largest youth organization, as you well know, in the city. And tonight, I just wanted you to know, on behalf of the entire club, how supportive we are to the all-weather fields at Heather Farm 1 and 2. Extremely excited to see this item on the agenda and to renew really the momentum that has had in previous years. But we believe we have a plan that will work, that will be great for the community, that will be great for youth sports, that would utilize the fields. And we have the right people aligned with us and really committed to this long-term project. I might add, this will not just be kind of a club-only endeavor. We have reached out and have partnered with a consulting firm, and we believe that with their help and expertise, they will lay the groundwork to get us to the finish line, which will be the all-weather fields. And with their help, our target audience, of course, is our membership and our friends of our community. There'll be donors through grants and foundations that we will be entertaining, along with corporate sponsorship and advertising. So we're ready to do things a little bit differently, but we think the end result will be that field or those fields that are so used by many. And we think that our plan will, again, with the city's help, will be a great kind of public-private partnership. So thank you for the opportunity, and we look forward to seeing this plan move right along.
Thank you for your comments, and thanks for waiting around.
We have no other hands raised at this time.
Okay, so I think we can move into any commissioner comments as our next step here. So do we have any comments to be made? I'm not seeing anyone. I do have some comments I'd like to make. Since this is a working session and we'll get another look at this, I may have added a few things that otherwise I wouldn't have, but it's worth a try. I think in the first two cycles, the 22, 23, and the, I'll probably get it backwards. First two cycles, first two-year cycles. I think we have potential to add some projects. There's clearly going to be $4 million of in lieu parkland funds, no question about it. And we're spending, our proposal is to spend much less than $2 million each of those 2 years. And I think that we would be doing the right thing for the community to at least put more forward to the city council in terms of some additional work, additional areas. And I don't have any specific things that I'm necessarily looking for, but I think that we've learned a lot about our users and what resonates with people during this last pandemic 12 months. And it's shown just how important our parks and our open space and our recreation, for that matter, but we're not here to talk about that at the moment, have meant to the health of our community. I think we would be doing them a better service by trying to put some projects out that they're going to see. They're not going to see much of what we've proposed to spend. They're all good things that we need to do, irrigation, et cetera, things like that. We'll save water by doing things better. And I'm not trying to tear things down. I'm just trying to fill some places where I think we can really contribute to building some things out. And I think we ought to consider that. Some of the things that I think about are areas of that we don't seem to address because we're kind of stuck in the your parks, your future hold status on Civic Park. Shadelands, which it's not really a park, so I don't see how we can fund anything there. But some aspects of Heather Farms could be enhanced as well. But I also have Larkey and Rudger in mind for looking at this round of review, and things where perhaps we might have recognized some needs during the pandemic, and our staff is probably best equipped to tell us about that. Some of us have our own opinions about it, what we've observed, what we've seen, whether it's very utilized open space, it's sometimes overutilized open space, and some of the aspects of our parks that have been open for the duration, and then things that maybe to recognize some areas of growth, like sand volleyball or regular volleyball. There are a lot of parks that we have that don't have those facilities. And maybe putting a couple here and a couple there, for instance, might be an idea we could consider. Pickleball still is a growing sport, and I know that there were some issues with some of the things that happened during the pandemic that didn't work out so well, but there are a lot of people that are engaged in that sport. And most of the funding for that has been from the pickleball club itself. So I would think we could look at some opportunities there. So these are some thoughts, but there are some dollars that we do not identify, some projects that we don't identify that haven't been in the plan before. But now that we have a new look, fresh look at our parks and our open space, there's some opportunities there. I think we would better serve the community if we put them out in front of them and then put it out to the council if we agree upon them. So that's my 2 cents on the whole program. Okay. Any further thoughts from any of the commissioners before we move to the next agenda item? All right. Our last agenda item is staff announcements or brief reports on activities. Anyone have something to say? It looks like Mr. Safin has joined us and has his hand up.
Thank you, Chair Roller. It's been a long evening. I will not take too much of your time. Good evening. For the record, Kevin Safin, Director of Arts and Recreation. Nice to see you all. So a few updates from me on behalf of the Arts and Recreation staff. You may be familiar with the Luminary Walk that took place a couple weeks ago. It was an evening activity on 2 different evenings around Boundary Oak, a loop there. And we had a great turnout. And I'm bringing this up mostly to thank one of the volunteers who helped with this project, which is Commissioner Moran, who helped check in people at that time. So thank you, Brendan, for your help with that evening. Camp registration has started. It took place, started last month. So we encourage people to, if you have the opportunity, camps will be done safely and hopefully within the county regulations. So please do encourage your friends and neighbors to sign up for camps. I shared with you news about the Clark Swim Center closure. We are still closed. We'll reevaluate that tomorrow. It's likely that we will extend the closure beyond Tuesday, but I'll give you an update on that via email tomorrow or Wednesday at the latest once we see where we are. And then
Kevin, could you just say a bit about what necessitates the closure given the circumstance?
We did not have enough staff to operate the facility safely. So we had
Thanks.
to,
Yeah, that's helpful.
Yep. That's without
I
lifeguards.
didn't know if something like more terrible happened or something.
No.
So, yeah, okay.
No.
Boring
I mean, that's
explanation.
challenging. That's challenging enough, but yeah, no. And then on the good news front, with regard to the pandemic, over at Tice Gym, the county approached us about a week and a half ago, looking to open up a vaccination site there. They came to us on a Friday, wanted to open by Monday. So thanks to Jim Carlson and his staff and Rich Payne on the maintenance side, we converted the facility from a sports gymnasium to a vaccine site in the span of about a day. It opened on a week ago today, Monday. And so they're doing about 450 vaccinations a day up there. So if people have interest in signing up for a vaccine, it's for 65 and over. The county's public health website has information about that. So we're happy to host it. It'll probably be there for the next 6 months. So excited for that. That's my update, Chair. Thank you.
I don't see any other raised hands.
Nope, I don't have any other dates. I'm echoing. Is there any updates from any of the commissioners?
No. Okay. Then I'm going to virtually gavel this meeting to adjournment. Thank you all for everything you did tonight. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.